Well, when Johnny was first starting out, he was signed to this personal service contract with a big band leader. And as his career got better and better, he wanted to get out of it. Now, Johnny is my father's godson. And my father went to see this band leader. And he offered him $10,000 to let Johnny go. But the band leader said no. So the next day, my father went to see him, only this time with Luca Brasi. And within an hour, he signed a release for a certified check of $1,000.
How did he do that?
My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
What was that?
Luca Brasi held a gun to his head, and my father assured him that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract. It's a true story. That's my family, Kate. It's not me.
Do you expect me to talk?
I'd just like to preface this episode that any dodgy impressions of Marlon Brando will be done by Chris and Dave. We give it up when we get bruised. But yeah, I can't do it.
What the fuck was that? I think you probably get refused.
Hello.
I pity the fool. Mr. T is Don Vito Corleone.
Anyway, hi, and welcome to episode 102 of Do Expect to Talk. I pity the fool that doesn't know him.
I pity the fool who comes in here on the day of my daughter's wedding.
Yeah. And of course, we don't want to jinx him. So, Mr. V.
Mr. V instead of Mr. T, Mr. V.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, hello and welcome to episode 112 of Do You Expect to Talk? I am your host Becca, and with me, as always, are my consigliere Dave and Chris. How are you both doing?
Good evening, folks. Consigliere. That means I'm not in the family. I'm just a trusted advisor.
Yeah, you're just an advisor. You can.
I'm not a pure
clan, so you can sort off.
All right.
I'm a bastard child of the family. There you are.
We took you in. It's fine.
Chris, I'm so glad you were available to record this, though, because this is going to be a bumper episode of Chris's Fruity Corner.
All the child scaring origins.
So expect the vineyard version to be about 7 hours long as he appraises each grape individually.
We get more in the next week's episode too. More Sicilian vineyards.
So what film are we covering tonight?
Yes, so we are taking a break in between series to recover a fairly short series. Epic Godfather series. So tonight we shall review Godfather Part 1, starring Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, James Caan, Diane Keaton, Talia Shire, John Cazale, and many, many others, based on the novel by Mario Puzo. He also co-wrote the script along with Francis Ford Coppola and directed by Francis Ford Coppola and released 1972.
Yeah, we thought we'd go for a nice short lighter tone for.
Yeah, it was this or commentating on Austin Powers, and we thought this would be more gigglesome.
Yeah, small dick jokes in this.
More fruit jokes in this.
It's that scene where he fucks an orange, isn't it?
Before we move on to the grapes. But anyway, I thought we'd get all the dodgy impressions out of the way. I was almost going to ask my uncle if he can come on the show, just because he does a really good impression of Marlon Brando.
I'm glad it's of Marlon Brando. I thought you were going to stop at he does a really good impression.
No.
Yeah, it's Joe Pasquale, but
he does a good impression generally. No, he's got good impressions generally, but his impression of Dog Credit is just is amazing. But luckily I didn't, unfortunately. So
I wonder where the idea came from, putting two like bits of cotton wool in his mouth.
That was all Brando.
Method.
We're going to talk a little. Well, that's a strange method, isn't it?
It's a very odd method, but he's well.
That's the method. For anyone listening who hasn't studied acting, whenever you hear about method acting, it's just tissue in your cheeks at all times.
But he was known for being a method actor, wasn't he? So.
Yeah, he was. He was, and we actually see the sort of the teacher of method acting in next week's film. We'll cover that with Lee Strasberg. Obviously, a lot of that sort of stuff and sense memory and all of that was taught by him. This has a phenomenal cast, but it was not quite as strong at the time in that Al Pacino wasn't quite the star he went on to be. But and Marlon Brando's career was in a little bit of a funk. But yeah, you look back on it now. I mean, John Cazale starred in 5 films. He was a stage actor mainly, but he starred in 5 films, and all of them were nominated for Best Picture. So, The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, Dog Day Afternoon, which is a fantastic film, by the way.
That's a brilliant film.
Deer Hunter, isn't it?
And The Deer Hunter. And he was taken sick with, you sometimes see lung cancer. I've read it as bone cancer in the past, but he died at the age of 42.
No, he was quite young, 42.
When you watch The Deer Hunter, he shot all his scenes early in the shoot because he was dying.
Yeah, he was quite poorly.
Seeing Meryl Streep at the time, and Meryl Streep went to the director and sort of got it all changed around because he wanted to finish his role. But yeah, what a career that is. Well, there's an actor in this who did nothing but star in Best Picture nominees.
Amazing. Totally superb.
Brando himself, his career was sort of a little bit past its best. He was sort of in his late 40s by this point. He's playing a lot older.
Hence the cotton wool.
Yeah. He sort of wanted him to have a sort of bulldog quality to him. Now, I mean, he made Last Tango in Paris around this period, but apart from which is he probably made it around her periods as well. But yeah, he
passed the butter.
Yeah, which he probably did. I wouldn't recommend that film as anything other than a curio because it is bordering on porn, frankly. And it was he was up on an obscenity charge in Italy. Leonardo Bertolucci, who made the film. This film is just a story of a director's nightmare. Now, it doesn't match something like Apocalypse Now, which was famously such a nightmare that it got a whole documentary made about the making of it called Hearts of Darkness. But all the way through this film, for most of this film, Coppola was under risk of being fired. The studio wanted none of his choices on anything. So this is a period piece. It's made in the early 70s, but it's set between about 1945 and about 1955, 56, something decade, like that. It's about a decade. That's a period piece. Now it's it's comparatively be like making something in the 90s now, but they wanted to make this fairly quickly and fairly cheaply to cash in on the success of the novel. This is Mario Puzo, writer of the first draft of Superman the movie. His third novel, and his first 2 novels didn't do particularly well. So he deliberately went a bit more commercial on this. You watch the films and you think of a very classy product. The book is trash, in my opinion. For those of you who have read it, feel free to disagree, because most of the things that are here in the films that went into making such a quality story and quality character work are in the book. But the book has a ludicrous subplot, which I'll get to when we sort of introduce a character in a little while. And it's just really, really trashy. But it took off in public consciousness, sold millions of copies, left Mario Puzo a very, very surprised millionaire. And although he had a gambling habit, so he struggled to keep ahead of his wealth, if you like. So they wanted to make this film fairly quickly. Bob Evans was the sort of lead producer at Paramount Pictures at this point on most of these films. He'd made his name with Love Story. And in sort of shepherding this film through, they offered it to Elia Kazan first and others. And I'm suddenly blanking on the names, but sort of some of the famous directors you can think of. Oh, Arthur Penn. Arthur Penn, who did Bonnie and Clyde, was offered it. And there's a very Bonnie and Clyde-ish scene in this film. And they all turned it down. Gangster films of the time tended to have largely Jewish casts, funnily enough, and they were very trashy, just like the novel this film is based on. They wanted somebody of Italian extraction, preferably, but I think they got Francis Ford Coppola in on the basis of a couple of things, really. Firstly, he was still relatively young and cheap. At the point when he was hired, he was in his early 30s, and he'd won an Academy Award around the time he was hired for the script for Patton, the George C. Scott film. So he had a bit of cachet behind his name, but I think they thought he was cheap and could be sort of pushed around a bit. Every decision he makes in this film is subject to challenge. They didn't want Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando had a horrible reputation that I think most of us know about now. We certainly talked about it through Superman. He was known for being disruptive on sets and just difficult to work with. And his peak had sort of come and gone, really. And he was struggling to get work, or decent work anyway. Then you've got Al Pacino, largely theatre actor. He wasn't wanted for Micheal. I'm pretty sure, and I might be misremembering this, but I'm sure I've seen a screen test with Martin Sheen for this. But I know they tested James Caan for the role. They just didn't want Al Pacino, this sort of short, insular actor. We think of him as very shouty now, but his performances were a lot smaller back in these days. Largely a theatre actor. The only film I'd seen him in that predates this is a film called The Panic in Needle Park, which I think is the year before, and I think that may even have been his first film. This is like his second or third. They didn't want Nino Rota, the guy who wrote the music for this film. Bob Evans wanted somebody a bit more Henry Mancini-like, and a lot more use of source music. They wanted to set it in the 70s to save costs, because pre-CG and stuff, the big sort of costs really come from costumes and period details and stuff like that. They wanted it to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. This film is 2 hours and 57 minutes. And all of these things we can talk through when we go through it. You've also got a director. They thought it was going to be fairly action heavy because it's a mobster film. He was just under constant stays of execution. So he would, the very first week, he shot the Sollozzo scene, which is the scene where sort of Mike really joins the family properly. And that saved his job for a while. The scene where we see Talia Shire's character Connie beaten up by her husband, that was a desperate attempt to sort of put something a bit more actiony in,
edgy.
because
just the idea.
Let's beat the shit out of her then. I must point out Talia Shire is his sister. Now, originally, he didn't want to cast her. This is one where you think, oh, well, he obviously fought to have his own sister on the film. Actually, not quite true in that case. He didn't want her because he thought she was too pretty, and he always envisaged Connie as being rather plain and only able to marry good-looking men like Carlo because of who she was.
She's quite plain.
Yeah, but there's a natural prettiness to Talia Shire, certainly at this time. I'm not saying she's, drop dead gorgeous or anything, but he certainly thought she was too pretty for this role. So, they were going to bring in an action director to sort of beef it all up a bit. He'd get to the end of weeks and he'd end up firing like his first AD and stuff, so they couldn't take over, over a weekend or anything like that. Just all sorts of things to try and a final cut was fought over terribly, and we'll talk about that as we come to it. James Caan tells the story on one of the bonus features. There's a documentary made around the time they were filming The Godfather 3, and he said, Francis knew who he wanted. For the sons, he wanted, and Marlon. He wanted Marlon. He wanted Al. He wanted John Cazale, and he wanted James Caan. And, he went out and did screen tests with them, which cost him, as James Caan said, 4 corned beef sandwiches. Here's your sandwiches for the day. And he said the studio after that did hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of screen tests. And we ended up with the 4 corned beef sandwiches.
The 4 people that he wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So he got his way on everything, but he had a nightmare making it. It's relatively low budget comparative to how it looks anyway. And that's not obvious, but it's obvious in a couple of shots, and I'll get there. It's just no time to redo things and a bit of sort of lazy second unit work and stuff. The film cost $6-7 million, something like that. It is worth saying that when people talk about the sort of rebirth of cinema in the 70s, and I think they mean in box office terms, they frequently point to Jaws. cinema had been dropping away in popularity post-war, frankly. Television.
Yeah, TV is the main culprit for that one.
Stolen its thunder. So people didn't go like they used to go for a double feature and all the rest of it. This film, when it became the highest-grossing film of all time for a couple of years, I think Jaws beat it, actually.
Yeah, well, I would say Jaws would be like the modern equivalent to the blockbuster. That was like the film.
Yes.
Probably this is obviously where it stopped. Well,
but there was a
actually,
period.
if you want to go back to the blockbuster, you have to go back to The Exorcist. But I say this is probably perhaps where it all started.
This is the first film that sort of woke a dormant industry. Let's put it that way. And it was at one time the highest grossing film of all time, which is amazing when you look at the sort of films that dominate those lists now.
Yeah,
and I'm not looking down my nose at those types of films at all. But the modern equivalent of a Godfather would never sort of
that wouldn't reach those dizzy heights today, unfortunately.
No, it wouldn't. It would, it would kind of do.
It would take like a Titanic or Avatar or.
Yeah, this did a shade south of 300 million worldwide, which is massive for the early 70s. And I think that's all I want to say to sort of start us off. What are your experiences with this film?
I'll go first, briefly. Just because I haven't got that much to say, really, because I haven't had much of a attachment to the Godfather series. It's always been one of those films that's, well, I say the series, really, that Godfather Part 2, maybe not so much 3, as, like, really high regard. Like, the go-to answer is like, oh, what's your favourite film? Oh, The Godfather. I mean, that's maybe not as so much as common now, admittedly, but especially when growing up, it was like that kind of mobster classic that everyone just sort of knee-jerk just said. It was like kind of like, oh, okay, it's not my kind of thing. It's always been a bit long, and I never really sort of got into it. So it's one of those films that I've always appreciated rather than loved. But it was good. It was a good watch. I had recently. But I haven't got that much. Well, I probably will have much to say, but it'd be more a case of as we're going through it. But it's a very much. I feel it's maybe a bit too long, a little bit too dry, but that's my palate. That's just going against my palate. But other than that, I don't really have much of an issue with it. But I will let Becca say a piece.
No,
No, I'll have more to say as we go along because I'll have but yeah.
Yeah, but you can't invent some deep history with this film you don't have, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty much the same, really. I watched this film, also doing like American studies, obviously at uni whilst I was in America, and also back once again in the UK, module on American cinema and films of the 70s. And yeah, no, it's quite interesting. But unfortunately, I was just saying, obviously, before we started to come on the show, I don't think I've seen this film, or indeed the trilogy, since my uni days. So that was well over a decade ago. I probably did watch it recently, but I don't remember. So this rewatch has been a long time coming. Again, I think I read the book a while, but unfortunately, it has just sat on my shelf. Unfortunately, tried to say that 3 times quickly. Oh dear.
I shat on myself.
While selling seashells on the seashore.
That's what I didn't want to say. Splendid. No, that's what I didn't want to say. But no, yeah, so this is quite an interesting watch as well. I love the colour palette of it. I love all the costumes. Anything like sort of any period films. We've spoken on this podcast a long time about kind of, if you're having to look at like the costumes and the sets and things like that, then you're not really paying attention to the story. I was paying attention to all of it. I love the story, I love the characters. Michael's one of those characters. You kind of, there's many sides to him. Like he's sort of quite reluctant taking on the role, but by the end of it, obviously he's basically kind of leveled the playing field. Okay, this is who I want to surround me. This is how I want to go forward. Vita's time is over. My rules now. But it's interesting that also it's somebody like Al Pacino, as you say, who is this towering figure today. This is a very early role for him, so it's nice to kind of to see him come into his own, as it were. But no, I had a good watch of it recently. It's a bit long, but it's fine.
You didn't get go, oh shit, oh that they will get this on Godfather Part 2, but go, oh my god, that's off that. You forget like the
exactly. Yeah, you do kind of forget it, don't you? And for like you kind of hit all the beats. Also like Sicily, or the assassination, like where Sonny gets beat up, like the oh god, he gets shot up, by the toll booth.
Yeah, he gets beaten up by all those bullets.
What? No, he gets shot at in his car. But obviously, he gets kicking in the street as well. He's like, right, you're gonna have it with my sister. I'm gonna kick you to death. But just all the kind of famous bits. And also, there's some of those films that just worked its way into popular culture. Like we're talking about, what would you say your favourite film was, like The Godfather? There's a scene from Family Guy where I think there's there's some problem, and they're drowning essentially. Peter's
yeah.
I will let you know, I never cared for The Godfather. That's it. I'm just going to admit this now. One very early on Simpsons episode, it's a snow day, and they're basically forced to go into school, and then Bart is just basically pelted with snowballs, and it's literally frame for frame.
You will see also next week we've got a mafia don that's sort of in the 1910s, and I think it's the 1910s that Robert De Niro's young Vito basically supplants, and that's parodied in a Simpsons episode. Don Fanucci.
Yeah, we have that definitely as well.
Yeah,
We have the whole like Tony and Legitimate Businessman's Club and things like that. So that's all it's a looming shadow. I don't know if I say it earlier, if I enjoyed this film. I don't know, this one that you can enjoy. I love all the creative aspects of it. So as I say, like the costumes and the sets and things like that. And Sicily looks beautiful country anyway.
I really, just to pick up what you said, I mean, I do, I'm kind of the same thing with you. I mean, my mum and dad always used to watch it, and so it's always been, like, there, but it's just not something that I've never personally taken to, until someone actually bought me the DVD set I actually have now, and I sat and watched it. I was like, oh, okay, now I kind of get it, but I still never really kind of, I just never, like, came back to it, because I don't know. It's just kind of one of those weird things. I mean,
because it's quite heavy going, isn't it? It's kind of, it's not your lightest story. I mean, it's an epic story definitely, and a very important piece of 70s cinema and cinema in general. But it's the same. It's something that my parents kind of grew up with. They probably went to go and see it, and it's just wasn't it? Perhaps if somebody hadn't sort of got it for me, or like the box set that I have, I'm actually borrowing from my mum. So. And it's not one, sadly, that I own myself, unfortunately. But that's not to say, I don't recognise the series for what it is. I do. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the talent that goes into it. I'm just rambling now.
I think what it does really well is it does handle the characters really well. Like, you really get a sense of who these people are. Some characters not so much, but predominantly the main players. The way it just sort of like it tells you who, like, everything about their personalities, just like in a really nice, cohesive, natural way. That's really good, and obviously it's much more about like the family aspect, so it is very much more about characters interacting with one another and how they feel. But yeah, I think just to pick up on what on its general feelings is, you never, because we're like all three of us well versed to, like, say, film Twitter. We never really hear much conversation about The Godfather, other than like, oh, it's great, or maybe the characteristics of certain scenes, or Marlon Brando. But bar that, you never hear much talk about why The Godfather is really good, which is kind of why I'm actually looking forward to doing this, because I like to hear Dave's perspective on it. It would be the first time actually dissecting it, going through what he really likes about it, and in a way it'd be kind of like, oh, I get it now, or I can make more sense, because I never really much talk about it. I don't know, maybe that might be one of the reasons why I've never taken it to so much, just because I haven't heard much chatter about it, really.
Yeah, this is our parents' generation's Goodfellas, I'd say.
Yeah.
To our generation, Goodfellas is what this film probably was to our parents' generation. With me, I mean, it's sort of, you've kind of gone and done sort of opening thoughts there. So if I just add a couple of bits about my history with it, I'll do my opening thoughts as well. Just a couple of things I forgot to mention. This film is shot by Gordon Willis. Another massive point of contention on the screen, because Coppola was sort of effectively a movie brat. He was that same generation as Brian De Palma, George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, and you could throw Friedkin into that as well. What's the other one? Oh, the guy who did Last Picture Show.
De Palma?
No, Last Picture Show was... De Palma's in that group anyway. And in fact, if you ever get a chance to read anything on a company called American Zoetrope, take it, because it's all about Coppola's ambition getting the better of him. He lost a lot of money a lot of times through his career. It is a career, in some respects. We were talking about Scorsese before we started recording, and that's a potential series down the line, just out of conversations we've had tonight about different things. But in some respects, I'd like to cover Coppola the same way. But there's two problems with that. I think all his good stuff's in the 70s. I think he basically, in the 70s, he did this.
Yeah, Jack.
The Conversation, the part 2 of this, and Apocalypse Now. And then after that, most of his stuff's not that amazing. I mean, Jack's obviously sublime. But, yes. That is Robin Williams playing a 10-year-old who ages 4 times faster. So he's in a 40-year-old body. And it's just the last thing you could imagine this guy doing.
It's quite unlikely, isn't it?
It almost feels like a Jim Carrey thing, doesn't it? Almost.
It does. And I think that maybe he would have probably been in consideration because it's a 1996 film, but I suppose they wanted to cast middle-aged, and Carey wasn't at that point. Maybe if they'd made it 10 years later, I don't know. But I suppose the other film he'd be well known in popular culture for would be Peggy Sue Got Married. But even that film it lives in the shadow of Back to the Future because it's a time travel light comedy-ish film from the same era, and there can be only one, and it's Back to the Future. Unfortunately, he directed. He got his start with Roger Corman. He did a film called Dementia 13. So he's another one who got sort of grandfathered in by, that's the wrong term for it, who got supported and funded by Roger Corman early on. He also did what's he called? Fred Astaire's last film, Finian's Rainbow. He did a musical with him in like the very late 60s, which when they went to process the film, they cropped it. So they've made a musical with Fred Astaire and cropped out his feet in most shots, and he's a fucking dancer. So not a great idea.
What's the point? What's the point?
Coppola's filmography is far, far too patchy for me to want to spend weeks doing it. Whereas Scorsese, there are even lauded Scorsese films I'm not that fond of, but there's so much richness and variety in his filmography. Great. But Coppola was a movie brat, as I've sort of gone off subject there. So he clashed a lot with Gordon Willis because Gordon Willis was a very classical stylist. So Coppola would tell him a shot he'd want it, and Gordon would turn to him and say, well, whose perspective is this from? A very basic. And he's like, well, I don't care. I like this shot. So where Marlon Brando is shot, you get photos, you get shots from above him, looking down on the street. Well, he just thought that was a good shot with all the oranges going everywhere, but Gordon Willis was furious at that shot.
He wasn't having any of it.
He also allowed a degree of improvisation, Coppola, whereas Willis was very much about actors hitting their marks, which is important to a cinematographer, because they need to know where to point the fucking camera. So they need to know where actors are going to start. For those of you who don't know, and 90%, 95% of the people listening know this, but when actors are filming a scene, there are literally bits of tape on the floor telling them where to stop when they deliver certain bits of dialogue and so on. And Coppola kind of shat on all that.
So you probably imagine that Willis was probably secretly hoping, I hope this fucking flops.
Quite possibly. I mean,
and then it comes out and everyone's like, oh my god, what a genius Coppola is. He's like, fucking twats.
Yeah. No, they did come to an accommodation because he shot both sequels, and Gordon Willis is in the scenes of that documentary for part 3, and they're having dinner and talking. And Gordon Willis, they made their peace, but it wasn't the easiest thing to start off with. My history, but yeah, I mentioned Gordon Willis because he shot a lot of Woody Allen films, which many of them not visually that award-winning, but one of them was indeed Manhattan. So, and I think he may have won an Oscar for that. I don't know without looking. But he shot, I'm looking now, he shot The Parallax View, he shot All the President's Men, he shot Clute.
That's a good film.
So he worked with Alan J. Pakula for a while. Really, really good films, all of those actually. But yeah, he did some of the very best looking Woody Allen films. Although having said that, he also did The Money Pit with Tom Hanks. But yeah, so my history with the film, it was a film my father always talked about a lot. I came up in conversation with someone I was dating when I was at university, And she literally said, "You haven't seen it? Oh, we've got to go and get it." And she literally more or less marched me to the fucking video shop there.
Oh.
You know, we were like in my room, and
Yeah,
it was
you've got to do this now.
suddenly we're walking down the street to see if we can find a copy of the fucking Godfather. And we get in there, and they had a copy of Part 2. So I saw Part 2 first, which works as a narrative, but I'm going to say a lot about 2 and its benefits, pluses, and everything else. But I think it helps if you've seen the first one, let's put it that way. But I did follow up that. I was blown away by the look of it more than anything else, the look and the sound. Although never buy the soundtrack, it's a waste of money because it's 11 slight variations on the same piece of fucking music. It really is, with a couple of Al Martino songs thrown in. But I saw them over the next couple of years. And then around my 21st birthday, I got the box set on video. That's how long ago it was. But it was the re-edited version. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on, probably a bit more next week, actually, because there are deleted scenes. What they did was re-edited it in chronological order. Next week, we've got effectively a film that serves as both a prequel and a sequel to this. So you open with Godfather Part 2, all the early stuff. Then you get The Godfather. Then you get all the sort of the later period bits of that film in afterwards, and then Godfather Part 3 was in the pack as well. Much longer, but the two bits together are about 6.5, 7 hours, something like that, because there are deleted scenes put back in. That had all the documentaries I've referred to when I talk about, the 4 corned beef sandwiches and all the problems with casting. Fell in love with it. It took me a very long time to watch them the right way round again. They came out on DVD late 2001. The current versions of these films still have all the features from that on, and the commentaries come from that era. So commentaries were recorded on all 3 films by Coppola by himself in late 2001. And I just fell in love with them all over again. I've always had a copy of these films. First thought on this film, just to keep it a little bit briefer because I'm going on a bit. The appeal of these films are in two or three things for me. Firstly, the attention to detail. And that's only something you know if you have listened to the commentaries, but there's lots of little things in this film that Coppola knows to put in because he grew up in an Italian-American family. And he grew up, he was born in, I think, 1939, so he would remember just that post-war era. So there's little details, even in the cars, in what goes on at the weddings, that he would know about. The sounds of it, again, the soundtrack as a whole is a disappointment, but the actual key sounds of this film are beautiful. But it's the character work as well. If you watch any kind of genre filmmaking, which frequently has good character work of its own, and then come back to this, it's just fascinating. Micheal has one of the best character arcs of all time, and I consider it one of the greatest robberies of all time that Al Pacino doesn't have an Oscar for this film. Over and above, we'll talk about how this film did at Academy Awards and stuff a little bit later on. But he was up. The problem is the vote was probably split because 3 of the actors in this were up for Best Supporting Actor. So James Caan, Robert Duvall, and Al Pacino all up for Best Supporting Actor. So, but it's one of the most fascinating character arcs. It's one of the things that people talk about in 2, but Michael's character arcs in this film, in my opinion, I don't think where he finishes Part 2 is that far from where he starts Part 2, in my opinion, but it's all in this film. And so I always loved that. And the other thing is, I think it's probably because I don't have an awful lot of family of my own. I always find depictions of families fascinating because family is something I don't fully understand. So to actually see it portrayed and feel real and feel what it must be like to have siblings and stuff, because I don't.
That's quite a dysfunctional family, though, isn't it, I would say?
It is and it's not.
No.
What they do is dysfunctional, but their relationships to each other are all fairly normal.
No, definitely. Maybe that's why I love The Simpsons so much, even though, because I obviously have parents and the rest of it, but I don't have siblings myself, so it's quite fun to have, even though they are very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And films, other shows of that nature. So.
And I went looking for the quote that was on the DVD box set. It was literally handwritten on the back or signed by him on the back. And he said, and I cannot remember the exact quote, but he said something like, I always envisaged The Godfather as the story of a king who had 3 sons, and to his eldest son he gave his passion and all the rest of it, meaning,
Kind of
son.
like Leah, but not quite.
To his next son, he gave his sweetness and kind nature, meaning Fredo, and to his youngest, he gave his guile and cunning, or something like that. And you actually see that in Micheal. He's actually one strand of Vito. He's not as complete as Vito as a mafia boss. I can't criticise anyone's experiences with this film, but I've never recognised complaints about length, dryness, pacing, anything, and I don't just mean my sex life.
I wasn't like earlier. I wasn't like complaining that the film is obviously it's 2 and a bit, like 3 hours. It's
you can say whatever
I think
you
it's
want
really interesting. There's lots to pick out, definitely. It's just and as I say, the next part 2 is even longer for sure.
Yeah, part 2 feels it though. I mean, I like part 2, but
it's all necessary. It's all, if there are any bits that obviously there are deleted scenes, but it's all necessary, and everything that you need is there on screen.
I have a deeper criticism coming up as well. So,
no.
but no, it is more of a case of how, the female characters are portrayed. They aren't as fully rounded.
I would say the same.
That's kind of deliberate. One of the things Coppola did when they were prepping is he got them to behave like a family, but he got them to behave like a family from the era. So Coppola would a bit like Cubby Broccoli. He would, perhaps it's people of Italian extraction. He used to cook for the cast and crew quite a lot. And he would have them eating together, and they would have Marlon Brando at the head of the table and all the rest of it. And they started to behave like a family. Some of the quote unquote sons would like show off to him. Some would badmouth him. Some would joke with him. But he made the women serve. He made like Talia would be like serving the food. Well, he just said that's what would have happened in a family of that era. I wanted to mimic the way the families behave. You don't have time for everybody, unfortunately. This is Marlon Brando won Best Actor for this. He refused to accept it because he was a bellend. But he sent like some fucking actress playing a fucking Native American to pick it up or something.
Oh, so it was actually a real Native American?
It wasn't a real Native American, it was an actress.
Yeah.
I believe, anyway, but she turned up to complain about the plight of Native Americans on his behalf. He was just a twat. But anyway, right.
Isn't the fact that she's an actress playing, isn't that just a bit, that just comes off a bit stupid? I don't know how widely known that is. I think people think it was like, it's Little Feather or something, but it wasn't, she wasn't a real, well, she was probably a real Native American from extraction, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
But the other thing is you do hear it in part 3, but you never hear the word mafia mentioned in this film, partly because the mob started like threatening Paramount Pictures and stuff like that. They shot up Albert Ruddy's car, who was one of the producers on this, who won an Oscar because it won Best Picture, and obviously Best Pictures go to the producer. And the deal they did was, okay, well, we won't mention the word mafia. Well, it wasn't really in the script anyway, so that was an easy thing to gift. The mafia are worried about being portrayed badly. Isn't that the ultimate fucking snowflake?
That's the ultimate irony.
I know. Yeah, I think that's as far as I really need to go on sort of background with it. It's a film I've always loved. It's a film that flies by for me. I've never had a problem with the length of this film, and but because there are consistent character arcs working through the film. I think if you had any problem with this film, and it's the one thing that tells me my father must not have seen it on first run. And the reason I say that is my father had the shortest attention span in the fucking world. And not a short attention span, he could watch things that were 3 hours long, but if they weren't instantly awesome, he got pissed off. I remember watching Last Crusade with him, and after like 10 minutes, he was like, oh, same old story, first one's the best fucking one. And he was really a miserable bastard to watch a film with, actually. I love my dad, but and he was funny and he was a good guy, but the problem with my dad was if he didn't like something, he wouldn't allow you to enjoy it. And The Godfather starts with 25 minutes of just watching people at a wedding. And I know that would have driven my dad nuts if he hadn't already known this film to be a classic that he was supposed to like before he saw it. So that's the only bit where you may have a problem. It takes a little bit of a while to actually get into it properly, but it's all background on the world, and there's a ton of detail in it.
Setup as well, isn't it?
It's all ton of background I'll pick up, and the clip that plays on the start of this episode that we're recording here now is from Micheal and Kay at that wedding, and it's just wonderful to see. Again, it's something you don't see very often. People age and harden and change in such a compressed period, and Al Pacino just essays this sort of gentle decline and a sort of death of his soul, really.
And on that happy note,
with hilarious consequences and fruit.
And lots of scary oranges.
Yeah. Oranges always sort of come up at portentous moments, but actually you can film theory that to death. They just wanted to put some colour in. Simple as that.
Yeah, literally. I mean, yeah, there are lots of theories about the oranges in this film, but it's literally
and
just
they're all bollocks.
To make
the
it more
filmmakers
colourful.
said it's bollocks. It's just to put colour in. Because the film's shot very dark.
Like David Baldwin going, actually, it means this, and this. Oh, actually, no, it doesn't, David.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. Shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
Yeah, go on then. So we start at a wedding, don't we?
Yeah, this is the wedding of Connie, who is the Godfather, Don Vito Corleone. We get a bit of his background next week. He's an Italian mobster, one of the 5 families we find out through the film that sort of control the city. That's their code word for, effectively, the mafia. The 5 families.
The 5 families that run the...
Yeah, run New York. We see all the background next week.
Which one do they run? The colony? Which area? Because there's Brooklyn, isn't there? There's Brooklyn, Staten Island.
I don't know that.
They've each got a district to them.
I'm not sure I've ever thought of it that way. I suppose that would map to boroughs. Because there's 5, aren't there?
That's a good question.
I don't know. I've never thought about it, actually, if I'm truthful. They certainly... Yeah, we'll get onto that, because I don't think I've got an answer, is the honest point. But he's got 4 children. And they are very distinctive characters. And I get what you're saying about the women, and we'll get onto that. But certainly the boys are very, very distinctive characters, very, very different from each other. You've got Sonny, who's very hot-headed, very passionate, and we see that quite literally early in the film. Quite hot-headed, probably sort of number 2 to the Don at the moment. At the very start of the film, he's the only son in the room. He's got Micheal, who's effectively, he's the youngest, but he's effectively been away at war. So he's signed up to serve in the armed forces. You've got Fredo, who's a bit of a mess and very weak. And then as an adjunct to that, you've got Tom Hagen, and that's explained to us quite early. Tom Hagen was found on the street by Sonny as a young boy, taken in and raised as a son, but he can never take over the family because he's not of Sicilian extraction. And that's the Robert Duvall character. I can see why he was nominated as well. He's terrific in this film. So the film starts with, I believe in America, it starts with an undertaker. There is an idea that, or a tradition that no Sicilian can turn down a request on his daughter's wedding day. His daughter Connie, played by Talia Shire from the Rocky films, is marrying Carlo. And there's a few things just to point out here. Firstly, we get that he gives everyone an audience because that's the tradition. You take requests on your daughter's wedding day. You literally give them cash. The bride is being given a lot of cash by people. Tossing sandwiches to each other. You see them tossing sandwiches to each other. That
does sound like a euphemism, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not a euphemism. It's not. It's a nice mayonnaise filling.
Crunchy.
He just said.
You'd be full. That's a day of. That's Carb City, that isn't it?
Bloody hell, 5.5.
Try catching that in your mouth from 10 feet away.
You'd be stuffed, wouldn't you? Literally.
That's why I shot like that all the time.
That used to happen. He said that happened at weddings he went to. He said they used to call them football weddings because the quarterback tossing the sandwiches. He said it was just a thing.
It's one of those things where you have to kind of, if you're of Sicilian or Italian extraction, it must help.
Yeah, he is. He grew up in an Italian family. I don't know if he's Sicilian, but he certainly grew up in an Italian family. That's another thing. They didn't even want to go to Sicily for the filmings of those bits. Just really, they really wanted to half-ass this film and just hope the book's popularity would power it through. But so he's hearing a story from an undertaker who is saying that his daughter was dating somebody and he brought a friend along at one point and they tried to he tried it on with her. She kept her honor, as he put it, and then she was basically beaten up by him and a friend and nose smashed, jaw smashed, put in hospital, and they got suspended sentences. And so he's going to the Don to basically say, I want revenge. And the Don listens for a very, very long time. And it's just a very, again, it's very like the pacing of the film. The camera just slowly reveals. It just slowly pulls back from him because it starts one frame on his face. And the Don gets up and gets a bit pissy with him and just said, well, you're only coming to me because you want a favour. You know, you haven't let me into your house. You haven't had a cup of coffee. My wife is godmother to your child.
Yeah, basically
your
he's
only
not been a
child.
friend.
Yeah, tiny little detail. He's stroking a cat all the way through this. This cat was just wandering through the shot, and just Coppola just put him on Brando's lap. So him gently
He
stroking
looks
a
quite
cat.
happy as well. The cat. I was thinking, because you always look out for, like for example, twice when Blofield's got the cat, he's struggling to get away.
Yeah.
But here, the cat seems quite happy.
Cat's really happy. Really.
Loving it.
Auditioning for a Bond villain.
I thought it must have been a trained cat, a session cat, if you will.
Session cats, yes.
But
double
no,
cat.
that was just on the set. And that's another thing to point out. Mob bosses normally were a lot more demonstrative, loud, intimidating. And Brando going...
It's a very kind of very quiet performance, isn't it? Not quite very understated, but actions speak louder than words, for example.
Mob bosses talking like that in any kind of pop culture now comes from that. Because
Yeah, exactly. That's where it all comes from, basically.
Yeah.
But it also had the presence of respect, isn't it? It's you kind of get this like kind of lived in what's principle of of how gangsters actually are. They're just a bit they are about we're happy to do favours and that, but we actually want respect. You just come in asking for a favour. It's like, well, I've seen fuck all of you.
Yeah. You don't come to my house. You don't invite me to your house. Not even for a coffee. You don't call me Godfather. You've never come to me in friendship. And a key point here, and something Sonny doesn't have, is a proportionate response. Proportionate according to their moral code. Don Vito always goes from the perspective of reason, and we'll get that reason through his bloodshot version of it, and we'll come to that with Michael's story in a little bit about Johnny Fontaine. We'll come to that in a little while. But he doesn't want these people beaten to death. He's like, give it to Clemenza, get trusted people. We're not animals. We don't want to kill anyone. So he accepts that. We see that. That's quite an important story. There's a lot of character work in that with very little. Just that story and his response to it. In the room, Sonny's in the room, which sort of puts him as heir apparent. And Tom Hagen is in the room, his consulary, which is effectively, he's a trained lawyer. He's effectively, it's an advisor role, effectively. What else do we see at this wedding? We see Luca Brasi. That was a happy accident. There's film of him struggling to practicing what he's going to say to the Don. They filmed that afterwards because when he went in, the guy wasn't really an actor, and when he went in and did the lines, he kept flubbing them and fucking them up. And in the final film, they're really stiff. So they then filmed him doing that so that it put it into perspective. Like, he's frightened, he's nervous. And that tells you something because he's a really big guy anyway.
Yeah.
He was a professional wrestler, Lenny Montana.
But he's probably just how he is. He's probably, for lack of better words, he's just a big dope, really. But he always has this. He can tell from Brando that his character kind of like has an affectionate for him. Because he's like, well, you're loyal. That's what I respect. That's what I like. And he lets him finish his thing, and doesn't interrupt him or anything. He just sort of sits there waiting. Yeah.
Okay. At the same point, Michael arrives at the wedding. There's a few things about this scene, and we don't need to cover all of it because it's 25 minutes of the film or so. But there's a few points to notice. Firstly, Michael doesn't look like the rest of the family. I don't mean genetically. I just mean he's in his army uniform. He's turned up with a very sort of waspy woman, Diane Keaton, who is certainly not of Italian extraction and not of any sort of mob background. She's a teacher, I believe, like an elementary/primary school teacher. And the other thing is, when the Don eventually does come out to sort of join the wedding, he won't do a photo without Michael. And Michael won't do the photo without Kay. So there's an element of he doesn't quite belong. He half belongs to that other world, which is dating women like Kay. And also, he would be. You get the feeling through the film that the Don almost thinks Michael's too good for that life. and he should have gone on and been a senator or something. And we'll get to a scene later, which wasn't written by Coppola or Mario Puzo. We'll get to later where that's actually said. But also, he's his favourite son, I think. You always get the impression Michael's his favourite, even from this scene. The scene that was on the start of this episode is Kay's just asking questions. She's like, who's that man? And it's Luca Brasi. And he tells a story about Luca Brasi. And Johnny Fontaine arrives at the wedding, who's like a music star, sort of in the style of Frank Sinatra. And it is rumoured this is largely based on Sinatra, because there are a lot of stories about Sinatra and the mob, none of which anyone can prove now anyway. And he tells a story about getting Johnny out of his contract. And it tells you something about the Don, that he's quite happy to use violence, but he proceeds with reason first, as he would see it. So the story he tells Kay is Johnny wouldn't be let out of a contract as things were going to happen. I think it might have been to do films or something. He wasn't let out of his original contract anyway. And the Don actually went along first and offered $10,000 to release him. He actually went with a financial offer first. And it's only when he gets bad-mouthed, and we see effectively a replay of this in a little while, that effectively, right, it's then gone out, and here it is. And for the insult, he reduces it to like $1,000, and he assures this man that either his brains or his signature would be on the contract. And that's the scene I've put at the start of this episode. And it's electric. It goes on for over a minute. I can't... I'm always spellbound by that story and the telling of it. And just the very quiet way at the end of it, Michael says, that's my family, Kate, it's not me.
It's incredible.
Yeah. It's literally the offer you can't refuse.
What else are we... we do hear that phrase in the study, which is shot very dark.
a couple of times throughout the film, isn't it?
It is. It's said in that study, which is shot very dark. That was a Gordon Willis joke. You cannot turn the lighting up on that. You can't do anything to process the picture.
No, it's very atmospheric.
It's deliberately shot very, very dark. And then outside is almost slightly overexposed. But he used aging material by then in terms of cameras and stuff. So it's got this golden look to it. Those aren't filters. They're the fact.
No, it does actually look. It looks like the whole thing is like bathed in sepia, but it looks beautiful though. It shots really well.
Yeah, that's
the opinion and cinematographer. It just looks beautiful.
What else do we learn? Fredo's drunk. So again, just adding.
Pretty much always drunk. Bless him.
He's a bit of a waster. He goes over to look at Kay, and he kind of like just kind of has his cheesy smile on. You've got Sonny. You see his temper because the FBI are there. And
he's always angry and trashes the guy camera.
They're taking registrations. One of the things you'll notice is, and this is another Coppola thing, after the war there was a steel shortage, or was it an aluminum shortage? I can't remember what bumpers were supposed to be.
Aluminium, damn it.
They put yeah, I know, we've got listeners from everywhere.
No, I'm joking. I'm being facetious, don't worry.
But you'll see they've got wooden bumpers, and that happened after the war. And again, Coppola remembered that and put that detail in. And you'll see bottles of things that are homemade, and it's based on his memories. But Sonny goes out, smashes a camera, and spits on the warrant.
Oh.
Which I've always found a bit, all the violence in this film, and it's spitting on the warrant.
Spitting against Well, because something is quite, it's quite gross, isn't it? Like, I mean, I must say the editing and the violence is something I will come to comment on near the time.
Okay. What else? So we learn about his temper. We also learn his wife is making signs to her friends that he's got a big dick. Next thing we see, he's fucking one of the bridesmaids. Now that bridesmaid, whose name escapes me, is the mother in universe. I mean the character, not the actress. She's the mother of Andy Garcia's character Vincent from Part 3. In the book, she never has Vincent. She is Sonny's mistress, but she has Sonny's. She's a lover of Sonny's because Sonny is well endowed, which is hinted at in this film. And it's a real trashy bit of the book. You assume the book is really classy, and it isn't. The book is a man who's had 2 previous books fail and thinks, let's put a bit of sex in it, right? If I was going to, his version of putting some sex in the book was to have a character with an oversized vagina, right? And she's
we'll put an 18 rating on this podcast.
Because normally we're quite clean. So she's having sex with Sonny because he's the only man who could satisfy her. And there's a whole subplot in the book where she meets like a plastic surgeon to try to get herself fixed and falls in love with him. And it's just utter trash and has nothing to do with any of the rest of the book. What else do we learn? We see Clemenza. Clemenza's getting drunk and dancing and all of that sort of thing. We see there are heads of the other families there. Barzini's there. He gets one of his men to rip film out of a camera. We're learning a lot without actually needing to be told very much at all.
Yeah, it's more of an introduction of the characters, really, and setting the scene, isn't it, rather than the beginning of the plot. The film actually starts, after here now, doesn't it, really? Because you have,
It does.
It takes about, 20-25 minutes for this whole thing?
I'm guessing. I probably did look, but I've forgotten. My guess is 25 minutes, something like that. I might be completely wrong. It might be a bit shorter, a bit longer, but I think it was about 25 minutes. And plot-wise, we're not being told a massive amount. We're just getting who everybody is, and we're learning so
It's all
much.
kind of world building, really, isn't it?
It's really good world building, and I think that sort of thing does speak to me. I mean, I find it with television shows a lot. I loved the first season of Game of Thrones, and quickly lost interest afterwards because I was more interested in just like the setting of the scene than I was than what happened in the scene, if you like. And I'm a little bit like that. I do like stories, and I do like all that sort of thing, but I like world building. I always have, and I've always loved this wedding, even though very little happens, and I can imagine people getting bored by it.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, I probably was a bit of when something's going to happen. But now, as an adult, I appreciate for what it's doing a lot more. You know, I can definitely appreciate it.
The other bit of character work that comes out of this, although it plays as plot, but it really isn't. It just tells you something about, the characters. It's got some relevance to the Vegas stuff a bit later on and so on. But Johnny Fontaine is, I think, the last person the Don sees. Johnny Fontaine turns up. He turns up to Screaming Girls and all that, like a real sort of star of the era. And he wants he wants a movie role, I think it is. It's not out of a contract this time. It's a movie role. And the Don grabs him by the lapels and like, you can act like a man, and all this kind of thing, which I find funny because he is whine.
It's the only time he explodes out the he
does explode out of that
like,
chair, which I love. I want that chair.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I just want the desk. It looks amazing.
Yeah, Coppola has that. He said he did take the chair. He has that on his Napa Valley. He's a winemaker now, basically. He does make films now, but he's got a vineyard basically.
A lot of them do go into like wine and wine and beer making and things like that.
Skywalker Ranch effectively a vineyard as well?
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. It might just be where they live. A lot of wine's made there, so I don't know. But anyway, so he sends Tom Hagen to LA, and this is one of the few bits of the film where you can actually see some of its issues, because when the plane lands, you get a bit of like effectively music of that. You get something a bit brassier. Now, when they did the film, it was the one bit Bob Evans insisted on leaving in. Eventually, they argued over cuts so much that Coppola said, look, let's play it both ways to test audiences and see which they prefer. And he said, whose decision will it be eventually? And Coppola actually just said to him, it can be yours. He said, but we'll go, we'll be informed by test screenings and all the rest of it. And of course, they all loved the music. They all loved Nino Rota's music for this film. Whereas it's just not what Bob Evans wanted at all. So that little bit of music there is a sop to Bob Evans. The other thing is, when you see the two actors in long shots, so you see Tom Hagen, but you also see, what's the character called? Waltz? Something like that? Schwartz, probably, Chris, isn't it?
Schwartz?
Yeah.
Not Schwartz.
Jack Waltz or something.
Right. He's the head of the studio. And in long shots, neither of them are the two actors. They just sent second unit there. And also there's a shot where they go through a door and you can actually see a couple of like early 70s hippies in the background. And it's just shot cheap. They just dispatch second unit there so basically he goes there to negotiate Johnny's to get into this film. And you see that this guy's also a horse owner. He's got like what are they called? Stables. Yeah, he's got like stables and a prize horse and horse racing and all that kind of thing. One of the deleted scenes, which was unnecessary, I can see why they took it out. There's a hint he's a paedophile as well. It's only hinted. I mean, there's nothing graphic, but at the top of the stairs is a very, very young girl and stuff like that in one shot. So there's a hint that he's got it coming to him, but the film doesn't need it.
It's a bit dodgy.
Tom's a lawyer. He's totally kind of,
polite and reasonable. Yeah,
but he and this might be the most famous sequence in the film. He wakes up in the night waltz and finds the horse's head in bed with him. Slight misreading of the book. It was actually down the end of the bed. I think it might even have been almost effectively on the bedpost in the book. But Coppola himself said he just misread it. But it's in the bed with him. And that scream is ridiculous. He does.
Well, it works better as a reveal, doesn't it? Rather than like...
It just wakes up and the first thought is this my blood? What's happened?
Yeah. It's just shitloads of it and it's like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he screams, so that I think that's character work done, really, in terms of background, because this has no ongoing major point to the plot, except Johnny will sort of owe a favour a bit later. But again, that's only real hinted at. I suppose the first plot thing is one of the other crime families. I think it's well, no, it isn't one of the crime families. Salozzo. I don't think he's one of the mob bosses. I think he works for one of the mob bosses. Virgil Salozzo, the Turk, really wants Vito to sort of get involved in drugs, and Vito doesn't want to get involved in drugs.
No, he's like the only one to say that, narcotics will be the end of us.
Or only one of the 5 families that says no.
Yeah, he declines, basically. He says, no, we're not going to get
into
it.
Why does he say no?
Well, not no, but he just...
Why does he say no? I mean, what's his reasoning? Do either of you remember?
I think it's something to do with, because it's going to split everybody up, isn't it? This is basically, it's going to, like, turn them against each other.
They're in weapons, they're in prostitution, they're in all sorts of, like, dodgy stuff. Drugs isn't that much of a leap.
I can remember when they have the meeting, I can really sadly remember.
I don't know.
One of the other bosses doesn't want to get into it.
It seems to be more like back to principle, really. It's more of like he's just against it personally, but he decides to, as long as they don't interfere in my business, I'm good out. I'm good staying out, thanks. Okay. I think there's talk also about like once you allow narcotics, it actually fucks your system up. Like then your people starts taking it, and then they become like harder to manage. I don't know. I think there's like I think it's just one of them. Things where
it's just best not mess with it. It certainly isn't. We don't want to kill young kids. It wasn't that, was it? It was just this is a bad idea.
I think it's how I don't want to say religious, but how you have people have different perspectives and principles, and it's just like I think that's just one thing. Even though it's like how can you say that because you still murder and whatnot? But I think it's just more of a case of that. It's like that's just one of the lines we just don't cross,
Yeah. So I suppose the next thing is he sends Luca Brasi. He sends Luca Brasi to meet with them. I think it's Tartaglia and Salozzo. And the garroting here, they always say they put this fine mist over him to turn his face black, effectively, as he's garroted.
It's a bit grim, isn't it?
I don't know how well the black comes through on screen, but he definitely darkens a little bit in pallor as he's strangled. So again, something's about to go south. You can just feel it.
Yeah, there's going to be a move,
isn't there? Dread, isn't there?
Yeah. At the same time, do we see anything between this and Vito being shot?
It happens all very quickly, doesn't it?
It does. The plot whips along for a 3-hour film.
It does.
Well, it has to move something. I've spent like 25 minutes just like doing much. That's just at a wedding.
We saw some sandwiches. Very little fruit, but I'm quite happy to do like a sandwich section. I like sandwiches.
Yeah, he's pretty much like he's gunned down. Is it Fredo who's with him?
Yeah, Fredo drops fumbles his gun.
Yeah, the ever so competent bodyguard.
Yeah, so you can see Fredo is absolutely useless. Vito is buying oranges. Again, Chris, any thoughts on these oranges?
They look very fruity.
I think they look tremendous. Really good fruit in this. And he's shot. He's shot in the street several times. This is all ordered by sort of that family, and Salazzo and all the rest of it. Before that, we get the sleeps with the fishes bit, don't we? Or is that the same time? Or is it just after he's in the hospital and the family all meet back at the house, don't they, to start with? And they get a fish basically delivered to the house. Which, again, if we ever do a fish section, I thought this fish looked quite nice.
Dave's Fish Corner.
Dave's Fishy Corner.
Dave's fishy fingers. No, that wouldn't work. That wouldn't work.
That would be an ultimate.
Oh no, there's a time and a place for that anyway.
Yeah.
Time and a place. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
This is neither the time nor the place.
Okay. So.
Sorry, we'll just say it for halibut. There we go.
So you see sleeps with the fishes as a phrase now, sort of in popular culture, which is just basically
That's where it comes from.
it's them telling him, look, Luca Brazzi's been killed.
Brazzi sleeps with the fishes.
Now, the character work I've always loved here. Now, I've obviously it's been pointed out to me on commentaries. I think I'd noticed it anyway. Did you notice it? I don't think the film hides it, but Micheal, traumatized by his father being hurt, kind of gets drawn towards the family now. So he goes to the hospital.
Yeah, he's a bit traumatized, isn't he? So he kind of gets drawn inwards as opposed to kind of being. He kind of goes the opposite way.
It's quite creepily shot, actually. Reminds me of The Exorcist from outside the hospital. But they get to the hospital, and it's all long, quiet, echoey corridors, isn't it?
Yeah,
And it's
like
none of
almost
it
like
doesn't feel
deserted. There's like really, like eerily, like what the fuck's going on?
They should be police on his door.
Mm.
He's a notable figure for the wrong reasons, but he's a notable figure. So he goes outside and basically gets. Now, who is it? Who's with him?
It's the baker guy, isn't it? The guy who said he baked the cake at the wedding.
That's it. He was a guy who was asking for a favour as well and had baked the cake and all the rest of it. Yeah. So, did you notice how calm Micheal was?
Yeah.
The guy can't light his cigarette because his hands are shaking.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Micheal not only is able to light his cigarette, but he actually looks at his own hands. I think he's surprised he's calm.
Yeah, he's surprised
like,
how calm he is. He's like, right.
And then the NYPD captain turns up. Klusky, I think he's called.
Yeah.
And Micheal is just banging on about why are there no officers on my father's door and all the rest of it.
Yeah, he's like, why is it not guarded? Come on.
McCluskey's in the pocket of Salazzo, and he breaks Michael's jaw. And they actually wired Al Pacino's jaw after this, because for a significant portion of the film after, he's got like a welt on his face and his jaw doesn't move properly, and that was Coppola again saying he just gets sick of seeing people hit in films and no damage. He said I wanted it to look.
Yeah, he has a real shiner pretty much for like 3/4 of the film.
Yeah, but in the immediate aftermath, he can't move his jaw properly. They've had to wire it shut.
No, of course.
His jaw's been broken. So
Yes, you have to wire it shut. So yeah, he probably suffers for his art.
yeah. So where do we go from there?
Well, yeah. So now basically it's all kicking off because it feels like okay, everything's in turmoil because.
And Michael
Don
is saying things to his dad like, "I'm with you now, Pop."
Yeah. And then everything's in discord. Doesn't Sonny find out that his sister's getting beaten up?
Yeah, that's another thing. We haven't seen them since the wedding. There are little time jumps in this.
And that's the thing. I don't really get a feel of the character for the husband beforehand. It comes straight to like
He's abusive.
He's like or something along those lines.
I think it's because he's not in their immediate world, and the women wouldn't be working in the family as such. So occasionally, tangentially, through sort of seeing your sister as you would, you start noticing bruising and stuff like that. And she's really quite battered around the face.
It is a bit unwise though to sort of start beating up the daughter of a mob boss though. I always think like, is that really a good idea? Like, I get that he's obviously a piece of trash, but
it's impulse. It's temper control. It's impulse control. It's most crimes are crimes of passion, as they say. Not premeditated in any way.
He's a cheater as well. He's going and seeing other women.
Yeah. That's a little later on. She takes a call on that. We'll come to that because that's around sort of what happens with Sonny. Micheal is they're basically talking about they need to retaliate by killing Salazzo and that captain. Don Vito's been very badly hurt. I mean, he's been shot, so it's obvious, but the effects of violence are really shown in this film. They really are. They're not wildly graphic either. It's just like the guy's debilitated and he's actually never quite the same afterwards.
I think he's treated very differently compared to like the violence against women and compared to men. Obviously, you don't want him up, but I think we'll come to it when we get there as well. I mean, obviously, I think it's just kind of like for example, so like Becca's wife, for example, you see it from behind. You know, you hear about it because it's in another room. But like all the male characters who get shot up, they really get shot up.
Yeah. In fact, we'll get. I'll hold it for that scene actually, because obviously I've listened to Coppola talking over it.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah, there's a reason for it, definitely.
But she start getting beating. So Sonny again, very hot-headed, goes right after that thing where he gets out of the car and he's got like a broom handle. He throws it in. That was James Coppola didn't know anything of that. He went to one of the sort of guys on the set and said, "Can you get me a broom handle?" And it's just something to have there to sort of chuck, because he was like, "It's not in the script." He said, "Just do it for me."
Yeah, just do it. See how it goes.
Yeah, and he gives Carlo quite a beating. There's one air punch that always bothers me.
Yeah, it's always pulled out as if they completely misses him. Like
it misses by a mile. But the whole scene works well. I think, would you reshoot it? Because you've got a burst water hydrant and kids playing in the street. It's really quite evocative stuff. Sonny's a cheat as well, to be fair, but he's not a wife beater. And the thing where he said when Sonny realizes his sister's being beaten, he bites on his hand. And again, Coppola says, I'd seen Italian Americans doing that. Comes from that. It's just like, almost like
trying to break free. Try and get him free from the bar, really, wasn't it? It was like, so it's like... Yeah.
No, not when he bites him on the hand. I mean, when he finds out, when he's in the house with, I think, his mother.
Oh, like when he's angry, he's just there, like...
When he's angry and he just bites on his fist when he realises what's going on. Coppola just said he'd seen that as a kid.
Yeah.
But the thing that comes next is they want to take revenge, and they want to set up a meeting with Sollozzo. And basically, Sollozzo wants to set up a meeting at a place of their choosing, and they're talking about who goes to do this, because Sonny's totally, we want to take him out, and Micheal very calmly says, "I'll do it."
Now, what's his reasoning for it? Is it just because he just thinks he's the better choice to do it?
I think he's seen his father hurt, and he's actually said, "I'm with you now, Pop." So he's already made his mind up that he will do what's necessary. I think he's also, you can't underestimate when he looked at his hands and he's like, "I can do this. I'm actually calm." And I think his argument is, it won't be expected. They won't expect me. I'm not in the family. I'm a soldier, or he was a soldier. I don't think he actually says I was a soldier, but that's the gist. It is, they won't be looking for me. You can't send Sonny. Sonny's known as a hothead. Sollozzo even says to Don Vito earlier, you can't talk business with him. So, and that's the phrase "bada bing" comes into popular culture, because he says, "Oh, it's business. You're taking it personal because some captain broke your jaw." He said, "No, you're not going to shoot him from distance. You got to get right up against him and bada bing, you blow his brains all over your nice Ivy League suit." Which again tells us he's college educated, and the very fact he's brought that up, Sonny probably never was. So this guy's promised himself, and he's about to go down a path that he won't be able to get out of. We see him practicing shooting with Clemenza, and he's got a gun that doesn't have any. It won't retain fingerprints. They've taped the butt of the gun and the trigger in a certain way. And he's actually saying, "How long till I can come back?" And it's like, well, at least a year. At least a year, because there's just going to be an all-out war after this, after we take out, a mob boss's man. And they've got somebody on the inside, because they find out where the meeting's going to be. But it isn't where they're asked to meet. They're asked to meet at Jack Dempsey's restaurant, which is the influence on Rocky having a restaurant in the later Rocky films. Because he went there, Sylvester Stallone went to that restaurant as a child, Jack Dempsey being a former world heavyweight boxing champion. So he's picked up outside there, driven a certain distance, heading towards Jersey, and then sort of a quick turn around. And they go to, I think it's the Bronx, they go to a restaurant in the Bronx, and they planted a handgun there in the cistern of the toilets. And I love this scene. This is probably my favourite scene in the film. Yeah.
So, now, I did wonder this while watching it. Did Cerrito, he kind of says, "Look, I'm almost like kind of fucked now, so I kind of want peace. I want to make a deal." Do you think he's telling the truth, or do you think he's bullshitting him? So I do wonder if they actually said, "All right then," and they could have avoided the whole thing.
I think as a family they would be weakened if they let an attempted hit on their father just go. I don't believe it because he sort of denies it because he's kind of, you think too much of me, kid. Almost like, I'm not responsible. Well, he was, and we know he was. What I love about this is that he's frisked when he gets there because he knows he's going to be frisked. And indeed, McCluskey is there as the sort of chaperone to Sollozzo. This was shot on the first week of this film, but Coppola was in fear of his job when he shot this.
I can imagine so.
Yeah. So, yeah, and they'd already gone like a day over in the first 3 days and things like that. So, I just love this scene. They actually took up the current flooring to reveal the sort of flooring that had been in the restaurant in decades gone by. But what I love about this is it's just the logic of it. He's frisked. The gun has to be hidden in the restaurant because he'll be searched as soon as he's picked up. And they don't know supposedly where it is, but they do know where it is, so they've hidden a gun there. There's worry as to whether he'll be able to shoot it properly. They'll be worrying if the gun's actually there, and it does actually take Al's character, Micheal, a moment to locate the gun. So for a moment, you think it's not actually there.
I always think, what if someone's in the shitter? It's like,
Yeah. Yeah, it takes ages and someone's in there like vomiting for an hour. But what I really love about it, because they calm down, he's been frisked. So Sollozzo, he says, you excuse yourself, you go to the bathroom, you get the gun, you come back, you shoot them both twice in the head, and you drop the gun immediately, which he doesn't quite do. And Coppola says,
he's supposed to sort of put his hand down and then quietly drop it to make everyone think that he still has it.
Whereas he's got his head up almost by his head, and he's almost towards the door before he lets it go. And Coppola said that was deliberate. He said, if I've done my job right, the audience should be like, drop the fucking gun, which was never quite the reaction I had. But yeah, he shoots one in the throat first, which is a really cool scene because of the way Sterling Hayden responds, the actor. He's very like in response. But I think the thing I like most about it is that it's by a train line, and they slowly intensify the screeching of the train outside. So it's getting tenser and tenser and tenser. And Al Pacino's eyes are darting all over the place. And you can almost feel like his blood pressure rising. I think it's an incredible sequence. It's one of the best action films I've ever seen.
Kind of the noise of the train. I think that's basically what it's representing. Like there's kind of more and more sort of the intensity levels kind of really rising.
Screeching. It's
literally as it kind of gets more and more loud, you just think and it's like the stress levels of the scene, like the noise of the train sort of going. It's amazing. It's done so well. It's one of like the most tense scenes in cinema. I was literally just like watching this last night. I was just literally on the edge of my seat going fuck.
I can imagine people at cinema like having that reaction first time around seeing it. It must have been one of those oh my god, like on the edge stuff.
Yes, a landmark moment.
But it's also like his actually beginning of descent into hell, so to speak.
But his eyes are going everywhere, and you can see the guy thinking. You can see the actor thinking.
What's going on?
He's almost method thinking it. You know what I mean? And he's
actually thinking it in a sense.
Yeah, it is, and it's just like it because it's his last chance. You want him to do it because you don't want him to get hurt, but there's no way back from this. This is a guy who should go on and be a senator, an all-American hero, fought in the war, the American dream, because he's descendants of people who came to the country with nothing.
Exactly.
Ivy League educated, so from an elite university.
He's going to be a mafia boss.
And this is his last chance. He's going to be a murderer if he does this.
Literally last chance to
his jaw out of outside a hospital because he was trying to protect his father is probably one of those sort of minor scandals you can probably explain away. Once he shoots somebody, that's it.
It's forever going to be on your hands.
It's my favourite scene in the film. It's not the prettiest scene in the film. There's stuff to come that I think's amazing. But if someone said to me, what's great about The Godfather, I'd probably play to this point and go, I think you've got it by now.
It's in one of the Cornetto movies as well, is it? It's one of the Dead or Hot Fuzz.
Is it?
I think it is. I just suddenly had it pop in. I just popped into my head, but I can't remember which, unfortunately.
I can't place it. I can't.
I think it might be Shaun of the Dead, but I may be wrong. Will be a fun fact when we come to it.
But yeah, some wonderful sound editing on this.
Fantastic.
The sound editing. The name Walter Murch is coming to mind, but he may have been the editor on the film. I'm not absolutely sure. But yeah, real key scene in the film. Saved Brando's job, and it saved Pacino's job as well because they weren't sure. They'd only done 3 days. The studio didn't want him, and the notes they were getting were like, he's not doing anything. It was too smaller performance for the studio, which is hilarious when you watch Al Pacino now, who is just ridiculously overacts most things he does now. But back in the 70s, he was a different beast.
Where's that come from then? Beat like overacting? Is that from?
I don't even know where it started. I mean, you can go back to things like
it's more
And
prominent
Justice
Heat,
for
isn't
All.
it? Really, it's a bit more.
Yeah, he does it in Heat, does it in Scent of Woman, but you can go back as far as something like And Justice for All. He's a bit shouty in that as well. I don't know. I don't think he's a bad actor, but I just think he's just easier to fucking parody now. This is not the same actor.
He has to kind of live up to that kind of being more of a shouty guy now, rather than go back to his roots. I don't know. But it's a similar situation as De Niro. Really, it's like he's had. I was going to say he's had his time, but not that he hasn't had his time. He's made his millions basically. He's a legend, so he can do whatever he wants.
Now it's interesting because he's got 3 sons, the Don, and the only one that dies is the only one that stays. Fredo's effectively sent to Las Vegas to work with Mo Green. We'll get to Mo Green a bit later, and Michael goes to Sicily. 4 years, as it turns out.
Isn't he?
Yeah, he's in hiding. They don't know he's there. The family claim they don't know where he is and all the rest of it when they see Kay a bit later on.
Does he bugger off out seeing Kay? Does Kay even like, oh shit?
Yeah, they say. I think Sonny says to him, "I'll get a message to that girl of yours." When I think
by
the
the time when he comes back, he's like, "Oh, how long have you been back?" And he says, "What, a year?"
He's been back a year and he's gone for like a few years as well. So there are a few time jumps in it. The other thing, of course, is in just a little while, like we see Connie's pregnant and heavily pregnant, and then a little bit later on, towards the end of the film, they're baptizing the second child and things like that. So there are a few little time jumps. So yeah, it just opens, it just erupts, and I think you see newspaper headlines and things like that. So just basically open mob warfare, and we sort of intercut between that. Michael kind of wandering around the Sicilian countryside with a couple of sort of minders, and bits and pieces of sort of Sonny with Carlo. Because I can't remember what order it happens in, but I think we probably need to talk a little bit about Sicily first. So
this is one of the things that I kind of, I won't say take issue with, but what I might point at, and I think maybe the book probably does this better, because you can sort of spend a lot of time on the book. Because I think also the film has a bit of pacing problem with time jumps, so that's one aspect of it, especially in this section. But the whole Sicily wife bit just felt like, okay, it just felt like, yeah, you're just set up to be killed, and the whole romance, it is kind of like Michael just sort of sees, goes, oh, you look nice, yes, let's get married, and just almost like forgetting about the previous... It
does move along very quickly from all of a sudden going, oh, there's her father going. There's nobody like that in the jettle, to all of a sudden, oh, they're married, which is fine.
I appreciate the element of time and also like actual real life. It's not probably been all like this anyway. But I think as an actual moving narrative as a film, I felt that was a little bit like...
There's a hardening that we need to see. There's a hardening of Michael through all of this.
It is. I was going to say that's pretty much what it means. It forced his hand really to come back to America. Because
don't forget, at the end of the film, he kills like all the other mob bosses.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think he ever quite knows who ordered the hit on Antonia, and after that, he's like, all bets are off.
Yeah, he's literally just going to slaughter everybody.
Because Antonia is cast deliberately young. In the book, she's 16, which is pushing it. The actress is only about 19 here. I
like her genes.
Well, she's not very old, but there is some. So yeah, I think that's deliberately though, that she's meant to be like wide-eyed and young, and when she's killed, it's that much more senseless.
I mean, it is shocking.
But I
understand why the scene kind of why it has to be. I mean, it's beautiful to see, and it's kind of nice to go back to kind of
it's gorgeous.
Corleone roots, as it were. Likewise, I apologise if I mispronounce it. Corleone, potato.
It's pronounced both ways in the films.
Cannoli.
Yeah.
But no, it's all good. But I get why this has to happen, but definitely. But just basically serves to kind of like force his hand and say, okay, there's
We missed the cannoli line.
Now. So you have to kind of, force his hand to get back to America and see to what's going on.
Yeah, there's a deleted scene around that I'll talk about next week. But we've got... we did miss that cannoli scene, actually, because when Vito's shot and Fredo drops the gun and all that...
Oh, yeah, leave the gun, take the cannoli.
One of the guys supposed to be looking out for him that day had rung in sick, and it's because he knew what was going to happen. So Clemenza picks him up, drives him out into sort of slightly more rural part of New York, and shoots him in the back of the car.
Done it.
Well, in fact, he has him killed in the back of the car while he's off having a piss.
It's quite brutal.
It's just, leave the gun, take the cannoli, which was an improvised line, I do believe.
It's gone down then, as immortal.
Yeah, we'll talk about Clemenza next week as well, because he's not in next week's film, and there's sort of a reason why. We'll come to that. I had a stepfather who was from the fairly deep south of Italy, and he did say that this sort of ability to you couldn't get near any girls, put it that way, full stop. So this overprotective father of Apollonia kind of rings true from what I've heard. They're good Catholic girls, and we don't let boys anywhere near them.
No, I think that's the thing with sort of just like my mum was supposedly Catholic, and her mum's Catholic as well, and I think she was like very protective of her daughter.
So it was mostly. Not to say it was mostly driven by his wish to get his end away, but there was like a general sort of like a romance of like, or like I left my life behind now, so I have to start a new one here.
There is that as well. What's the point of the romance? Well, several things. The hardening of the character when she's killed, the all bets are off with the other mob families, the sort of need to get him back to America, so it gets too dangerous there. But there's quite clearly the fact as well that it's him accepting he may never be able to go home. So he needs to make a life there.
I guess there was like a feeling of what, not saying it would have happened, but ideologically, we take Kay there, and Kay's the one that's murdered in the car. I just thought, obviously that affects the rest of the films. And I don't know what role Kay plays in the future, so I don't know.
Have you not seen the sequels yet?
I have, but I can't really remember too much about. So we'll get to that obviously. But
likewise, it'll be a rewatch long in the making. Yeah,
just going off this, just going off this as a first watch on pretty much, and seeing it as a film in itself without any attachment to the books, because it's actually trapped by what the book dictates as well. It was just my natural feeling of like, well, that'll make more sense because he's literally bought this completely innocent girl who is supposed to be is almost like linked to a life outside of the mob, and that's.
But that's meant to add weight to his. I mean, remember at the point where he finds out his father's been shot, they're shopping at like Macy's or something. I can't remember where it is. They're quite near Radio City Music Hall. I can't remember the layout of Manhattan.
I don't find New York is represented in this film. Obviously, it is a very violent gangland culture, but I just love like New York as a city. And
it's shot really well. It's shot even better next week. All the period stuff looks amazing next week.
Stunning.
But so he walks across the street to a phone box to call home. That phone box they had to put there isn't one there.
There isn't a phone box there, no. Fun fact, folks.
There never was one there, apparently. But he's with Kay, and he's Christmas shopping, and they're smiling, and they're happy. You don't see him smile a lot after the first.
No, he's quite serious.
The whole point of leaving Kay is that his decision is a profound one. We feel this is probably the woman he's going to end up with, and he just has to drop her without even saying goodbye. So it's to add profundity to the decision. If you take her with you, it's not as big. Basically, take that woman you love and go and live somewhere warm and nice. Yeah, what a fucking... Oh, that's a hardship. So I can defend most of these decisions. Is it a little... I think it's actually a little rushed, if anything. But the music... The music's at its best during that whole courtship. Because what happens is they see this woman. Micheal is immediately kind of like happens to a gentleman occasionally, we just go a bit open-mouthed and forget to move our facial muscles and stuff. And then they head off to a cafe. One of the guys, and the big clue is Fabrizio, one of the characters, is constantly talking about America. And there's relevance to that, which I'll talk about again probably
He loves it, doesn't he?
Probably next week, because that makes him easier to bribe. Because he wants to get to America.
Because he wants to go over, he's like, I'll go, or...
Yeah.
So I took all these actors' names.
Yeah. And Clark Gable's the one Becca knows. Becca knows loads of actors, but she can only remember.
Here's the other one.
But anyway, they go to this little cafe, and they're going on about this beautiful girl they'd seen and how their friend there had, been hit by the thunderbolt, and she had a purple ribbon in her hair. And immediately the bloke goes ape shit because it's his daughter.
There's nobody like that in the...
No.
Nobody like that ever.
The original book, I think it's in the book anyway, but it certainly was in the script that Al Pacino was going to address them in Sicilian. But Al Pacino could not speak that language and struggled to master it to a level that was good enough for that scene, which is why we go to him speaking in English and being translated. But I like that because it gives him a grandeur. This is the future mob boss. This is the future king. Yeah. This is the future king, if you like. So sitting there whilst his minions translate him, he sort of kind of admits who he is, or at least, he says who he is. Doesn't say what he is, but he just says a lot of people would pay for that information, and he's allowed to sort of court her very slowly, in that he's invited to like family meals where they're sat down the opposite end of the table from each other, and then eventually they progress to like walking as a group, and then he's out front with her, but the family are still there, and that Godfather love theme plays over it. Again, one of the most beautiful scenes in the film.
Yeah, it just looks stunning.
I always get a little sense of Majesties though, a little bit.
In what way?
With the wedding and things like that, and just almost like the visuals always has a little bit of a. I always, not entirely, but just has this little sort of aesthetic.
It is meant to look kind of more romantic, isn't it, as compared to all the violence and the bloodshed of the city. Because it has kind of like a sort of sepia tone, or
it's a beautiful little village,
like gross into spectacles, isn't it? It's kind of yearning for like the motherland, as it were.
Yeah. Shot beautifully, sounds beautiful. As I say, I always thought of it as one of my favourite scores. Then I listened to the score, and there's so little variation in it. But the main theme's actually beautiful.
Yeah, you got
so he marries her, and then sees her tits.
Let's get it out.
I may have missed the key point of this part of the plot. But boobs.
Then the sexy music starts.
Yeah, the Godfather theme, but played with sax.
So he's now married. He's now married to Apollonia, she's called. Now, I think it was around the time of the marriage, we see Connie. We do keep cutting back to home, and we see this scene that was going to be... I nearly laughed earlier, and I wasn't laughing at women being beaten up. I was laughing at the fact that we talked about this scene, and they were going to bring in an action director. And I'm just imagining this scene if directed by Michael Bay.
Slow motion.
Connie is at home, heavily pregnant, and she takes a phone call from basically a female voice asking for Carlo and saying she can't make it tonight. And you gather it's not the first time, because it's another one of those floozies. And she starts basically smashing the place up a bit. Kind of half-assed.
Just a bit. That's a bit of an understatement.
Well, she's just breaking crockery and throwing things at it.
Isn't she?
I know. And then he tries to make her clean it up and starts hitting her with his belt. Kind of around the backside. I'm assuming the actress is padded there. And then eventually she escapes to the bathroom, and he's calling her a guinea brat and all sorts. And eventually follows her into the bathroom. He kicks the door open. And then
we kind of hear about the rest of it from behind the door, don't we? And can we see like a glimpse of it in the reflection in the mirror? And it's just...
I'm not sure if you do. I did look for whether I could see anything, and I couldn't.
A little bit, and then obviously the door shuts.
Yes, okay.
It's a bit of a contrast, isn't it, between obviously seeing, the guy who's obviously doing like kicked to death, and then they're being shot up, and like the violence towards the women is more graphic.
If it had been Michael Bay, obviously.
Yeah, it would have done. If it was Michael Bay, it would have gone bang.
No, I think Hollywood's normally like that now. Like generally speaking, they tend to be okay with showing you people get shot up and graphic in that nature, but they tend to kind of like hold back against domestic abuse is usually rare when you see it full on. I don't think it happens a lot.
I just think it's a real contrast. I think that's quite interesting. Obviously, like this film, obviously to go through the censors hit quite a few hurdles, and it has, we haven't talked about the horse's head yet.
Yeah, we have.
And it's just like lots of other kind of shocking moments that you have in this film, but so you can show you like a severed horse's head. But yet again,
Real
you
horse's
can't
head.
see.
They got it from a dog food factory.
I know, but it's just like, oh my god.
Nice.
Just the way, anyway, to all dog owners there, obviously don't feed your animal horse meat.
Well, you're going to feed your dog's dog food, so if there's horse in it, you have been wrong.
Just say nay, folks.
Just say no. Dog owners, just say no. Well done, Chris.
Yeah, no, I always think domestic abuse is always like toned down usually in films, especially in Hollywood, particularly. But it's obviously okay with violence, with actual action violence, or like with things like guns or stuff with guy on guy violence, like boxing or fist fighting and things like that. But I think domestic abuse against women is kind of rare because I think it's almost like taboo because it's I don't know. I've always
literally goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah,
well, I think you're probably
I'm not saying
right.
it should be, but I just think it's just a stark contrast for me. For example, just something that I sort of picked up on. I'm not complaining. I don't think we should see it in all its glory. No, it's just something that stands out to me as a bit of a contrast. That's all.
It just seems like a line drawn. I think usually when it is done, it's rare and it's done to show how horrible it is.
To prove a point.
Yeah, usually. But
I think there's a sense of the mismatch as well when a man, particularly a vibrant young man like Carlo, beats like a fairly slim, heavily pregnant woman. That's a very one-sided proposition.
Yeah.
So obviously, two men having a fight, it's normally a little bit more balanced. So it would just come off as so incredibly unnecessary, I think.
Yeah.
Plus, when he gets comeuppance, there's more impetus for that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I remind you, the director is the brother of this actress.
Oh, of course,
and
definitely.
I think, and he actually pauses while he's.
That's been quite difficult to film then.
It's difficult for him to commentate on because when he's talking about it, he gets to a point and he just pauses for a minute and seems to lose what he's trying to say, and then you hear him say, "I'm sorry, it's really hard to watch my sister being treated like that."
Yeah, no, definitely.
I can't remember his exact words, but that's the gist of it. And so I think remember that too.
No, definitely. I just think it stood out to me. That's all.
Whatever the conventions, there's also the fact that
you got a family aspect to it as well.
It's also what I don't think he wants to direct it too graphically, to be quite honest.
No.
So I think that's a key point. But obviously, this is all a little bit of a ruse, because the next thing we get kind of a screaming phone call to Mother, who stood right by Sonny, and he eventually he kind of storms out of the house, doesn't he? Because it's happened again, and he did warn Carlo when he beat him in the street. He was like, if that ever happens again,
my sister, I'll kill you.
Yeah, and so he jumps in the car. They all seem to try and stop him, and Tom Hagen basically says, "Follow him," and he drives to wherever they need to go. They need to go through a toll booth at one point.
This is another classic scene.
Yeah, and he gives full credit here to Arthur Penn, who was offered this film. But Arthur Penn directed Bonnie and Clyde. If you've seen how that film ends,
that's very much a Bonnie and Clyde moment, isn't it?
That's what he's going for.
Yeah,
that's what he's going for here. I always remember James Caan saying, he said, people used to say to me, "How many takes did you do?" And he just said, "One."
That's amazing.
Because he said Francis was talking to him while they were sort of rigging him up and stuff, and he said something like, "I've never put this many squibs on an actor." And James Caan said, "You're telling me that now?" I cannot.
All the squibs.
I'm not allowed to fuck this up. Because he's got to mimic being shot dozens of times. So they've got all these scripts, which are little blood packs that kind of explode like you've been shot.
And it does actually look like, I actually winced watching it. I was like, oh, I have to look away. And I've seen it before, but it's just like, ooh. Bugger.
Yeah. I mean,
it's very violent.
It is one of those things because you're like, oh, not Sonny now. Like,
I know, you just think, oh,
you always,
frustration.
Yeah, it is. Even though he's probably not like give you much reason to like him particularly, but you do kind of like him because he is. Because out of the family, he's probably the one who is more strong-willed, and a bit more aggressive. You feel like the family, especially like the brothers, need him like around to kind of to be like to be to be that presence, you know.
Well,
to be
he's
that protector.
he's the only one still in New York. He's de facto running the family. The Don knows he can't assume power, and it does speak to me a little bit that the Don weakens faster after Michael gets home. Now, again, there's some time jumps, so we can't judge exactly, but I do wonder that he almost hangs on for him to get home, as in, like, Sonny can't run this family. He doesn't quite have the rounded character. He's too aggressive, and he will constantly be getting into battles with other bosses and all the rest of it if you leave it to him. Michael is much colder blooded, full stop. But in the absence of Michael, Fredo's not up to it, and he's not there anyway. So it's obviously going to be Sonny. So Sonny's running the family. So they've basically got the current de facto mob boss.
Yeah, kind of, it's forced into a position then, really, isn't he? Unfortunately.
I mean, the Don is in charge, but again, like I say, he's weakening day to day. His son is doing more.
Yeah. But where he's kind of like reluctant to begin with, he's kind of like, right, okay, I've got to take this on.
I don't think Sonny's ever reluctant.
Not Sonny. Sorry,
Sonny would happily be the boss.
Yeah. I think the reason that Sonny, it's good advice not to, just because he had so much of a temper, he'd rather give it to Michael.
Again, I don't think Sonny, as we ever see Sonny's view on that. I just think they respect their father enough to go along with what he says.
Yeah.
It's not that Sonny doesn't recognise those deficits in his character. His father does.
No, exactly.
But anyway, yeah, Sonny's like blown to smithereens, essentially, like completely turned to Swiss cheese.
Yeah, it's full of holes.
When they shot the scene, we see the scene of Robert Duvall, Tom Hagen, telling Don Vito, who still looks very weak. He's not long out of hospital. When they brought Marlon Brando, when they filmed that scene of him being carried up the stairs when he's brought home from hospital, he put like a couple of £100 weights under his stretcher as a practical joke, because they were like,
that's a workout.
When you see them struggling, they're actually struggling for real.
I don't think Marlon Brando ever did a single scene in his career where he wasn't like fucking around or doing something.
No, he was known for being a bit of a.
That did strike me as fairly funny, to be fair. Just because they go to carry him up and suddenly it's like,
like, right, I'm going to make you guys work for it.
Agonisingly difficult. What else? So he's blown to pieces, and of course news reaches Michael. Michael is told by, I forget what the Don's called, but a local guy we see, and he's told it's not safe for you here. They've got this like fairly, well, I say little, it's not a bad size at all, but they've got this villa. They've still got the two same guards looking after them, and he said, I want to move you to, I think it's Palermo or something. He wants to move him in the morning, basically. It's not safe for you here now. I'm not quite sure what makes them decide that at that point it's not safe for them, because there's been periodic hostility since he left. But we take that, and of course the next morning he's dressing. A couple of things we see. We have seen him teaching Antonia to drive, which is funny because Al Pacino couldn't drive at this point in his life. But yeah, he's teaching her to
English as well.
Round the courtyard. And yeah, was it Monday, Wednesday,
Tuesday?
Yeah. No, it's Thursday, Wednesday, that's it. She gets those two round the wrong way, and then Sunday and Saturday, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, so she wants to drive the car to impress him. And for Fabrizio, we've seen Fabrizio say to him, are you driving, boss? Is Antonia coming with you? And he said, yes, I'm driving. Antonia's not coming with me. So he's like, great. And what he knows, of course, is there's a bomb in that car. He's probably set it up, or at least enabled it to be set up. And of course, Antonia jumps in to surprise him. She wants to drive over to him. And of course, he turns around, sees Fabrizio, says, where are you going? Fabrizio sees Antonia's in the car, sees what's about to happen, immediately kind of skulks off. And we see Michael clue in, turn and just yell Antonia no as she turns the key. And he's actually blown backwards into the hedge, isn't he? And the car is wrecked. They really worked on getting that looking right. So, of course, she's now been killed.
She's with the fishes, or, well, not technically, but yeah. And then, yeah, do you go basically straight back to, Michael's goes straight back to America, really, doesn't it?
We go forward a year, I think, because we've in between we've seen Kay visit the compound, and you can call it a compound because it's behind big, fences and all that kind of thing. And she's basically got a letter for Micheal, and Tom Hagen has said, as a lawyer, I can tell you if I take that, a court could evidence. I could say I've got evidence of his whereabouts.
Always a lawyer.
Be patient and all that kind of thing. She's with some children, which again, I think she's like an elementary stroke primary school teacher. She sees him on a street corner. I think that was a reshoot. I think they redid it because I know Coppola was, I think he said that Al had put on a little bit of weight, and also he kind of bemoaned the choice of hat he put on. It was a bit pork pie.
It is a bit pork pie hat. Yeah, I must say, I was thinking,
But
sartorial choices.
Yeah. Vito, in the interim, Vito has moved to sort of try to stop everything. So he meets with the heads of the five families. Because the scene I started talking about and got myself distracted because I was talking about Vito looking unwell, is Tom Hagen has to tell him. But Tom wants a drink first, then he's going to come up and tell him.
Yeah, he's just kind of strengthened himself, hasn't he?
Yeah. They did 3 takes of that. Robert Duvall only ever does 2 or 3 takes normally. That's the type of actor he is. And on a whim, Coppola said, can we try a 4th? And his voice cracked on the 4th one. So it's absolutely perfect. And Duvall just says, I don't know where that came from. He just says, Sonny's dead. They shot him on the causeway. And his voice cracks on that. And he just says, I want no acts of violence. I want no acts of revenge. Arrange a meeting with the families. This stops now. They've both lost sons. Or a couple of them have lost sons. And he withdraws his opposition to drugs, basically. And that allows Micheal to return home. That's the point.
So he basically sort of says, I don't want to do it, but I'll let you guys do it.
Yeah, he withdraws the opposition. Basically, they don't need to attack the family now because he's not stopping their revenue stream. It must work on some basically. It must be it has to be unanimous, presumably. That's what caused him to be shot earlier in the film. He said no to drugs. Of course, that broke Sollozzo's, revenue stream. Once they officially end hostilities, Micheal can come home and be safe. And he basically says, if anything happens to him, sort of thing. We go forward, as I say, a year because he's been home a year by the time he sees Kay. And she's a bit concerned, obviously, with what he now does. And he tells her, my father's way of doing things is ending, will be legitimate within 5 years. And they do marry and have a couple of children. So we cover 3 or 4 years, probably, in a fairly short period. And again, his father is now getting very, very weak. Micheal now takes the family reins whilst he's still alive. He puts because I know at one point, I think it's in this film, that he basically sacks Tom. And
there's a bit of a move to like Vegas. He has to go to Vegas, doesn't he? And he kind of
they decide to uproot.
He says he kind of brings Tom with him. He sacks Tom from his position because I'd rather you with me.
You're not a wartime consigliere, he says.
Yeah.
But he's still family. He's still family, and he's still a family lawyer. And he just doesn't want Tom involved. They go to Las Vegas because his brother's there with Mo Green.
Is it Lake Tahoe they go to?
Lake Tahoe's where they live. You see that in part 2.
Yeah.
They go to Las Vegas.
I've been there many years ago, and I was like,
no, the opening scene of 2 is very much a sort of companion piece to the wedding at the start of this film, and it's on Lake Tahoe.
Mm-hmm.
But
so we were going there on holiday once.
The casinos are in Vegas.
Obviously, Vegas, yeah, definitely.
Obviously,
it looks very different now.
Yeah, totally. That's all. That's all stock footage and stuff.
That all changes every time. So.
Yeah. So they basically want to buy out Mo Green. They want to get out of the city. They want to get out there. I don't know if this is part of him trying to go legitimate. That he just said, "Well, we'll get into gaming out in Vegas or something." I don't know.
Yeah, so that's the aim to go legit within 5 years or something.
Yeah, the whole point as well, of course, is Johnny Fontane owes them favors and stuff, so they can get like the world famous Johnny Fontane to come and do sort of seasons at their casino and residencies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there is that. Fredo has lost the plot. He's like screwing around like it's going out of fashion.
Yeah, and
Poor Fredo.
he's pretty much getting bossed around by Mo.
He slaps him.
Yeah.
I love that. He said, Michael, he was banging cocktail waitresses 2 at a time. All right, fair enough. Mo Green's quite aggressive as well. Do you know who I am? I'm Mo Green. You don't buy me out, I buy you out. And all that kind of thing.
And Michael's kind of cool and just sort of like, no, this is going to happen. Or the negotiation doesn't go anywhere, but it's kind of go, okay. But he quietly tells Fredo, don't disrespect.
We're heading towards the end of the film now. Mo Green is another block that needs to be taken out of the way because he won't play ball with them, and they want to move lock, stock, and barrel to Las Vegas, and they want those casinos. So, or because he's got a stake in the family casinos anyway, put it that way. So we're coming into the final act now. We get to the mid-50s. Vito dies. Part 2 of Chris's Fruity Corner.
Yeah.
Tell us about this scene,
This
Chris.
is where your Fruity Corner really comes into its own.
Well, he's basically playing with his grandson, and he has a heart attack while a piece of fruit in his mouth.
Well, he's got a bit of orange peel in his mouth. That was improvised because the kid didn't want to play. So
He was scared for real, bless him.
Marlon Brando says, "This is what I do with my kids," and he did that. They're basically putting, I don't know if they're feeding or putting some kind of bug spray type stuff on the vines. They're the grapes. Yeah, he keels over. That's his son Anthony, he's the first thing we see present day, if you like, or the modern era in the second film, and he's also. It's funny because when you first see him in the second film, he's at communion or something, and then in the third film, he's actually training to be like a priest or something. I think, if I remember it correctly, but we'll get there. So the Don is dead. He was weakening. The scene that was before that, where they were talking about, he does say about, "I never wanted this for you, Michael. I wanted you to be like a senator, Corleone or whatever." That scene was written by Robert Towne. Robert Towne wrote Chinatown.
Of course he did. Yes.
Yeah, that was written by.
And also the classic Mission Impossible 2.
Oh yeah, randomly.
I'm sure we'll cover at some point.
I think we'll do Mission Impossible somewhere down the line.
We will. I dread doing 2 though. I can barely get through that film.
2's going to be a bit of a mish, but the rest of it,
Is
Mission Impossible. It really will.
Yeah.
I'm actually really looking forward to the new one though. It looks really good.
It looks amazing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if my TV self-destructs during that film, I don't think I'll mind. To be fair, it's the only one I don't like. So we'll see. Well, yeah, Mission Impossible will be down the line at some point. Yeah, Robert Towne wrote that scene. He just said we hadn't had enough of father and son together, and he says, I'm drinking more, and he's weakening, he's and so on. Around the time he dies, Connie asks, or Kay reports to Michael that Connie wants him to be godfather to her new child, which is presumably
Wink,
her
wink.
second child. Wink, wink.
Yeah, wants to be Godfather.
Oh, I see what you mean. Sorry.
No, wink, say no more.
The baby was expertly played in by Sofia Coppola.
Yeah, Bubba.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, best acting
what
she
she
does
did
in the series.
yeah. Fun fact for
So, but yeah, before we get to that, Vito had said to him, they also wrote that scene in, Robert Towne wrote it because they couldn't get the scene right. So they just said, well, you knew Robert Towne, can you have a crack at it? One of the things he says is that, he said, it's the person who comes to you. Your life is still going to be under threat. The person who comes to you, because I haven't made peace with Barzini. We see Barzini at the wedding very early in the film. Barzini will try to assassinate Michael, and he said it's the person who comes to try to set up that meeting and guarantee your safety that is the one that you will you will realise is actually the mole. And so when they're at the Don's funeral, so yeah, it's Tessio that sort of comes over to see him. Did you notice in and around these people was remember Rocky's boss, the loan shark?
Mm-hmm.
Joe Spinell. Yeah,
That's the one.
He's one of the guys. Yeah, he's there when
familiar.
Carlos killed. Yeah, it's just I've only noticed it on this viewing. I don't think I've ever seen that before. But yeah, Joe Spinell. This was kind of his break actually. So
Also, there's a couple of
he was
Rocky
someone Coppola. It's his first. Willie Chichi, the character's called. Yeah, The Godfather is his first credit, although he's actually uncredited.
Uh-huh.
He's credited in the second one, but yeah, this was his. Coppola kind of discovered him.
Wow, how about that?
So yeah, so Tessio comes to see him. Tessio, middle-aged man played by Abe Vigoda. I'm trying to think. I've seen Abe Vigoda in loads of stuff without knowing what I've seen him in.
It's kind of one of those character actors which he does crop up in quite a few things.
Yeah, he does. I'm just looking through stuff to see. He was in Cannibal Run 2. Yeah, we see him in various things. But anyway, he offers to sort of arrange a meeting, and of course, he immediately knows. Michael immediately knows, and he's actually asked, "Do you know how they're going to meet you?" Yes, he's offered me, guaranteed my safety, and you can see it on his face. And what I love is you can see Diane Keaton in shot, and Diane Keaton is clueless, obviously, absolutely clueless as what's going on. They're just at a sad time. They're at a funeral. Do you know what I mean? Mm. So I really love that. And then he does indicate that he's agreed to be godfather to the child, and the meeting is going to be the same day as the christening. But while the christening happens, I always remember hearing on the commentary that he said it's really Coppola was saying. My wife was always really struggled to watch this scene because Diane Keaton's holding the baby at one point, and her head is just not supported at all. And she just said it's really awkward. So Sofia Coppola is that baby. And I remember it was Joe Mantegna said that when they filmed 3, they filmed in the same church, and Coppola said to him, "Do you remember this is the church where we did da da da?" And Joe Mantegna was like, "Oh wow, brilliant!" And he said, "Do you remember the baby in that scene?" And he said, "Yeah," and then he just pointed at Sofia, and Joe Mantegna was like, "Oh, it just sort of gave me shivers." It was just, and I really love this, and it's all in the editing, and also the crescendoing of the music. It's organ music. He basically kills everybody off, and it's being intercut with him renouncing
during the baptism.
evil. Yeah, renouncing evil and renouncing the devil and all that kind of shit. It's just lovely.
It's one of those sort of iconic scenes in cinema as well, isn't it? It's like when you talk about sort of editing, you're always going to look at that particular scene where it's basically death and destruction, and
you've got
intercut with a deeply religious spiritual occasion.
Yeah, you've got Clemenza climbing stairs, which made me think of Scotty.
Oh, bless him.
Shooting them in the lift. You got a guy caught in sort of a revolving door and shot by Joe Spinell.
Shot in the face.
That is Joe Spinell who shoots him. You've got Mo Green shot in the eye.
Jesus, that's going to hurt.
Yeah, but yeah, it's kind of an unconvincing gunshot to the eye, because it's like kind of stays there for a bit, goes...
And then the blood decides to come out. Yeah. It's not bad, actually. I always thought it looked pretty good. I did wonder how they did it, because he's like, you don't want shattering glass near someone's eye and things like that. No. But they did it. So, yeah, we've got a run of them. We've got...
the makeup and scripts and all the effects, I think, have to be...
Tommy Gunn did bed, put mistress, wife, girlfriend, whoever... Mistress, girlfriend, wife, whoever she is, caught up in that as well.
It's unfortunate, isn't it?
It's a little bit like it reminded me when Samuel L. Jackson was shot in Goodfellas. There was just a little bit of like the sort of cleaning up after yourself sort of thing, and killing these people off. What was it? What was the other one? Barzini, I think, is the one shot on the steps by somebody impersonating a police captain.
Yeah, he shoots 3 people, doesn't he? The police officer.
Who does? That police officer, he shoots 2 or 3. So yeah, we just see everyone that matters, including Mo Green, because that's where they want to go next. You almost forget Mo Green, but of course, if they want to move to Vegas and have him out of the picture, they do that. And so they're all, he kills them all off. Comes out of the funeral just afterwards. He gets a whisper in his ear, which is clearly him being told it's done. And at the same time, he's like kissing the babies and all the rest of it. And then suddenly he turns to Carlo and says, "You're not going to Vegas. I go back to the house and wait for me." Because Carlo, when Sonny was shot, what I don't think we made clear, Carlo beat his wife to draw out Sonny, so that it was a setup to get Sonny shot.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah. So, Sonny's... the other thing is, we see how far Michael's gone, because Carlo is fucking terrified once he's at the house and realises. Yeah. He just says to him, "You have to answer for Santino." And he actually lies to him, which I don't think Don Vito would do, because he says, you know, I'm not. He tells him he's not going to kill him. I'm not going to make the father of my god, the mother of my godchild a
He
widow.
might be being technical as like, I'm not going to do it personally.
Possibly.
That-
Never
Technically,
thought
it's not him, but it kind of is. Like,
One of my guys
Attention.
might, but
Yeah. He's garroted by Clemenza, and he actually kicks out the window because he's sat in the front seat of the car. He basically thinks he's moving away, and that's it. At the same time, Tessio was about to go somewhere, and suddenly Hagen's like, "No, I can't come with you. You just got to get in the car." And Sal knows what's going on. He just turns and says, "I always liked Michael. Tell him it wasn't, but personal. It's just business." And I think that's where, as far as we go, until we get to a few days. It must be a few days later.
Connie has to go for killing.
Yeah, I think this is a few days later because they're packing up. They're packing to go to Vegas. You actually see furniture being moved around, and she gets out of a cab or a car or something hysterical, runs in to Michael, and she's screaming at him, "You killed him!" And Connie stood there hearing this, and not only does he sort of calmly cuddle her and then just hand her off to somebody else and get her out of there, but he turns afterwards and I think lights a cigarette or something. And he doesn't even sort of realise that, like, Connie would be a bit unsettled by that. He doesn't go to say or defensively do anything. He's just, oh, well, until Michael. And she just asks him, is it true? And it's quite a tense sequence because he's sort of saying, don't ask me about my business. And he's getting angrier and angrier until eventually he says, okay, just this once. And she asks if he killed Carlo. And he says no. And she looks relieved. So I don't know if that's just what she wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what he's doing at that point. He's kind of like feeding her what she wants to hear in.
But it soon kind of ends as she kind of looks and realizes how the shadow of Vito's. He's basically become that.
Because obviously some of the people arrive and they go over and start kissing his hand. They call him Don Vito. And then the final shot of the film, guy walks over, pushes the door, and we see it shut on Diane Keaton. It'll never be a woman's world, and that's the final shot of the film.
Well, it'll always be that world, isn't it?
But he promised her in 5 years we'd be completely legitimate. That was probably before the end of the 40s or around 1950. His father died in 55. They still hadn't made it. I think next week they're dancing very early in the film at some event, and she says, Michael, you told me we were going to be legitimate in 5 years, and that was, I think she said something like 7 years ago.
That was 7, yeah.
It's like,
They still haven't done it.
Working on it, Kate.
And then there's a big gap between part 2 and part 3, isn't there?
Part...
What would 20 odd get? It was like 1990, 89, 90 when it came out?
No, yeah, it was 16 years after the second one.
There we are. I can't count.
Chronologically, it's similar because the second one finishes in sort of mid 60s, something like that, and the third one is set in like 1979.
Sure.
So yeah, I'll just go first with my final thoughts. I've got a lot to add to what I said earlier. Actually, this film is as good as its reputation, in my opinion, and it's one of those films that you watch ready to love, because it comes with a reputation, or you watch with a pressure of feeling you should love it.
Prestige.
We were talking a little
prestige
bit
picture.
about. We were talking a little bit before we started recording because we were talking about Scorsese, but that only came off the fact that we were talking about somebody's filmography or something, and a film got mentioned, and it was Scorsese and so on. And we mentioned, we were looking at highest rated films of all time, like AFI lists, Empire magazine lists, that sort of thing. And we read out a list, and we got to Raging Bull, which was like 5th in one of them, or something like that. And Raging Bull's a film like that it's one of those films that when it finishes, if you don't love it, you feel like there must be something wrong with you, because its reputation is just so ingrained. And this is one of those films, and it's a film that, like, it would be... I almost wish I didn't like it, so I could sit here and give a braver review than this. I'm actually sat reviewing a Stone Cold classic and agreeing that it deserves to be a Stone Cold classic. It's as good as that. The character work is as good as anything I've ever seen in any film, certainly from the Michael character. It gets all of the details so what's the word? There's such granularity to the detail, down to throwing sandwiches around at a wedding, down to the label on a bottle, down to remembering to put a wooden bumper on the front of a car. This was forged in adversity from not a massive budget, and yet it's one of the prestige pictures. You watch a lot of prestige pictures, or a lot of pictures that are like, I struggle with Citizen Kane, and I'm not suggesting it's anything other than a great film, by the way, but I've never enjoyed it. I find it a really difficult film to watch. Chris was saying very similar about Raging Bull before we started here, and I'm a bit ambivalent on Raging Bull. The Godfather is one of those films that I don't have any difficulty in loving. I think it just romps through its running time no problem after that first 25 minutes. And that first 25 minutes is full of little details that I'm just absorbing and picking up and enjoying anyway. And there's lots of different little conversations happening. Every performance is terrific. Every casting decision feels right to me. I don't know that the brothers look like brothers, but they're so different as characters that it's actually kind of appropriate to have them as very different physical types anyway. The story's great. The character work is where this film wins, but it looks and sounds terrific. I love it every bit of it, as much of its reputation. Don't watch it that often. Probably haven't seen it for 5 or 6 years before we came to this tonight. I'll be interested to see how I respond to part 2, because I've flip-flopped over them over the years. There have been times I've thought 2 is the better film. The majority of my life, and the majority of the time when you ask me, I consider The Godfather to be the better film of the two. And I'll be interested to see how we come to this next week. But partly because of that film, I just feel a family here. And I just feel that that's attention to detail, that's preparation, and that's everyone bringing their A game. I love it.
Yeah, I agree pretty much what you said, really. I mean, I can probably pick faults of it as someone who is not accustomed to it as much, and it's mostly down to like preferential taste at the end of the day. However, what happened, I kind of knew that'll happen doing this podcast, was I kind of want to watch it again, because after hearing Dave's take on it, I want to actually sort of rewatch it and with almost sort of that sort of certain perspective, appreciate it more for what it is, and I'll probably get a lot more out of it. If I watch it again, I'll probably go, oh yeah, I'll enjoy it a heck of a lot more. But there isn't really much to say about it for me, because I think everything else has kind of already been said. But as Dave said, it is more of a character piece, and I guess I'm a bit more of a narrative man, but I think it's just down to personal taste. But
we all think we're into story, and we all think we're into it. We all know what we think we're into, but the proof tends to be in the pudding. And over time, I clearly like world building and character work far more than I'm fussed about what happens. At a broad level, when I go and watch even a Bond film, I don't really give a shit what happens in it. in a strange kind of way. If it looks right, feels right, and the characters kind of feel what.
It's why you like Dr. No a lot, because as you said, it's just Sean Connery just looking around,
strolling around, looking cool in a nice warm location and shit. Yeah. I love Dr. No, and actually, narratively, it's not one of the stronger films in the series. So
it's visually appealing.
It isn't just visuals, although I am a bit of a sucker for a pretty film, which is it's funny because I'm not that visual in life. I mean, when I go to presentations and stuff, maybe courses at work and stuff like that, when they start showing us fucking pictures to prove points and drawings and all that kind of thing, visuals, charts, I can't be fucked. I just want to read the text. So I'm not very visual, but I do have a weakness for pretty films. This is a very pretty film in places.
I think the difference in that is it is just down to care and attention to detail, and
I like
because Chris obviously come from that Italian background. Definitely, he knows what details to put in there and what you would expect. Because I'm sure that there are other audiences from similar backgrounds saying, "Oh, that's wrong," or "I recognise that from my childhood. I recognise that from growing up."
Recognises things. I mean, the thing, Game of Thrones is a very, very good example. I don't give a shit what happens at the end of that show. I don't care who ends up on the Iron Throne. I don't care about anything that happens. I just like the first couple of series where they were set in the sort of chessboard, and I don't care after that. And I think it is. I do like narratives because I do like talking through what happens in films. So we're only talking about an accentuation. It's not like I'm not interested in story and Chris ain't interested in character.
Oh no, it's all.
We're all interested in all of it.
But it's preferences.
the weight of my heart is world building without any question at all, and this film has it in spades. I love it.
Yeah, funny enough, I can't really add too much. Yeah, I would definitely agree. It's very much a prestige picture, and there is a lot of weight. Like when people ask you what's your favourite film, there is pressure on you to say something like Godfather or even Godfather Part 2. Like we were discussing this.
Weekend at Bernie's, just say it.
Weekend at Bernie's. What's like a really bad film that you could choose?
One Tough Bastard.
Yeah. Freddy got fingered.
Die Another Day. There you go.
Oh god. Somebody out there will have Die Another Day as their favourite film, and God love them. Yeah, it's just one of those things. There's a real kind of prestige picture, and it regularly tops top 10 films. You know, that sort of thing, as we've seen AFI, BFI, Empire title film ad nauseum. But I think I seem to remember when Lord of the Rings came out, that topped the charts, and then everything seemed to settle down, and it was kind of recognised for the sheer epic story that it was. But that's another story for another day. Yeah, there is the one thing I would find fault with, if anything at all, is just for, like, you know, representation of violence, and also representation of a lot of female characters in this film. But again, that's just like how it was.
Women getting hit properly.
No, that's not what I meant at all.
Yeah, why can't they make it graphic like
why
on
can't
the
they make it more graphic, more violent, more blood? No, I just think it's testament to like the editing and to the makeup, just how skillfully it was done. I mean, I do think it's, you know, I'm not complaining that, you know, I'm totally not. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's horrific anyway, but I just kind of stood in stark contrast that, you know, we can see one and another, but that's, you know, it does go on behind closed doors, and because you've got that family aspect to it, so I can appreciate that would be a difficult watch for him having to go back and do the commentary. But just in general, I mean, you know, you've got really classic scenes, but just, yeah, the violence kind of really stands out. It's just, obviously I'd seen this film ages ago, but I just totally forgot like how violent this film was, and I was like, okay, having to look aside at some point. Yeah, as I say, Micheal, in terms of his character arc, he does, you know, have the most, as you said earlier, Dave, the most interesting one, most meaningful one, in the entire series. Actually, yeah, we were talking on our chat thread before, and I sort of mentioned how I remember watching the trilogy ages ago, and like the second one, Part 2, is meant to be like the fan favourite, the one that, you know, it's kind of like saying like the Star Wars films, everyone goes for Empire. No.
There are similarities, though.
Goes for like the second one, basically, rather than the first one.
I will point out one similarity, though, Becca. I think Empire Strikes Back improves Star Wars. It does. It adds context to character.
So much more.
Whatever I decide on 2 versus 1 next week, 2 makes 1 a better film.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we can't have one without the other, really. And it's all important stories have to be told. And again, it's another landmark moment of cinema, and it's like cinema to come out of 1970s America. I think without this and the likes of The Exorcist, for example, I don't think we would have had Jaws and Star Wars, and it's really got it owes a lot to Hollywood cinema and cinema in general, and also European cinema as well, because that was another big upturn during the 70s, which I would like to do a little series on, but I'm sure we probably won't. But never mind.
Sorry, what would you want to do a series on?
Some of like the European cinemas will come out of, like, in Europe, for example, Reign of Fassbinder, for example, but I don't think I'll ever do it. So
okay.
But anyway, that's just an offshoot.
We can do anything if it's possible to make dick and fart jokes out of it. I'll have a go.
Auf Deutsch, you have to do it in German. So
okay.
But no, I was going to say if I could enjoy this one, but I don't think I can enjoy it. But no, it's very very stylish, very much prestige picture, and a landmark in 70s cinema. That's my final thoughts. Also, instead of having some fun facts, unfortunately, I don't have any fun facts because Dave has all the factage. So I have a little quiz.
All right then, because that went great when we did it before.
Well, this is a 3-film series.
All right, cool.
You know, Dave's got all the knowledge, so we'll just do a little quiz.
I've got a fun fact.
Go on then.
The choice between Brando, the second choice was Laurence Olivier, and the studio mostly wanted, can you imagine it, Ernest Borgnine
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Really?
Can you imagine this Brognine piece of fucking...
Thing is, we only ever hear the stupidest examples of this sort of thing because when the studios make decent suggestions, but maybe the one you didn't go with, it's not worthy of telling stories about, isn't it? But if you just cobble together stories we've told, like particularly with things like Superman, different studio, but Superman and stuff, where we talked about casting for that and on the Rocky series, you just isolating those stories make these studios sound like they know fuck all about anything. And I'm sure that's not quite true, but just very much just a completely commercial bent on everything. I'm not saying Ernest Borgnine was fucking hot box office by any means, but what I'm saying is every time
he could have generally been, we laugh at it now, but in an alternate universe, he could have been great.
I don't know, but all I think is that, you know, we've talked about the Superman series with the character of Superman, Rocky with the character of Rocky, and Michael Corleone tonight. 3 enormously different characters, and yet all of them, you're talking about the same people, Ryan O'Neal and so on, and it's just a James Caan, and it's just like, it's almost like they just had a list they went to and that was it, whether they suited the characters or not. I think this one's cast pretty perfectly. So we're doing a quiz for the listeners then?
Yes, only 5 questions.
Okay.
Just to test if, like us, you've been paying attention to the film. So, question number 1, and I'll read out the answers next week's podcast.
All right, that's great.
I just thought it would be something silly to do. Nobody's going to do it, but...
I don't care.
Question number 1. Which of Vito's children is adopted? Question number 2. What business does Lotso recommend that they all go into? We discussed this earlier in the podcast. Question number 3. Who's Vito's oldest son? And question number 4. What does Vito demand in order for the peace between the 5 families to hold on, to be upheld? And question number 5. Who masterminds the attempt on Vito's life?
I do want to just point out one flaw in the questions there. In question 1, you said which of his kids are adopted.
Well, not adopted, but...
No, but they're all actors, Becca.
Well, I know.
None of them are related to Martin Brando, you know?
No, I know, sadly.
Okay.
Guess what? It's only a film, you know?
It's not only a film.
It's an epic storyline.
It's a book as well.
It's
I can't see it as
somebody's mind, you know.
I can't see it as a musical.
Those strange things have happened.
All right, social media, folks.
You can find me at Cinema Talks on Twitter, though, where I tweet, and you can also find the podcast as well as our back catalogue with all the Bond films, which aren't on iTunes, at cinemaworks.co.uk.
You can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find us on Twitter at expectustotalk. If you like, you can drop us an email at expectustotalk@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, where a lot of our videos are. So if you go into YouTube and type in, "Do you expect us to talk?" And we are also on iTunes, Stitcher. We are not on Pinterest. We are not on Grindr or Tinder.
That doesn't mean we're on like Badoo or Match.com, by the way. Those are examples of dating sites, which is not just naming the only ones we're not on.
I'm trying to cover all bases there. We're not on Pinterest. I quite like to be on Pinterest, but what will we post pictures of apart from the films that we review? You can find us basically at iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. What's the other one we're not on?
I don't know. We're not on Letterboxd anymore.
No, I deleted that. That was an epic fail.
Yeah, because basically me and Chris didn't get involved in any way whatsoever.
No, let's do that.
I can't maintain my own letterbox, so...
And I can't be asked.
No, I've trouble with mine. I'm like, I saw a film. Quick, better write it down.
Strangely enough, I've got this format where I like tell people about films I've been watching. Yeah. It's this fucking podcast.
It's called This One, this is it. You do quite a lot of podcasts though, Dave, because you've got this one, Three Wise Men, Pull Up Flicks, and various other ones that you do.
Well, that's it really. Although I did record what's it called? I did record
Smorgasbord. That was the other one.
Yeah, no, Smorgasbord. We haven't recorded one. I recorded one of those 2 months ago and it hasn't come out yet. It is coming out. I keep being told, but I don't know what's going on with that. I did record an Eccentric Earth last night. With Amy Walker.
Oh yeah, looking forward to listening to that one.
What's Eccentric Earth?
one of my loyal listeners there. Amy Walker's podcast. She just basically.
Oh, okay, is that hers? Right, sorry, I thought it was a new one.
She basically reads her guest a story. It's cool.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know about it, but I've yet to listen, unfortunately. But I do.
I was on. I haven't been on
you
for
just
ages.
react to it.
Yeah, I haven't been on for ages, but I was on episode. This last night was something like episode 20 or something. I was on episode 2, so there is one out there. I think it's called the Incredible Leo Major or something like that. Leo Major was the story she told me the first time I was on there. That's out there. She said to me last night, which was really cool, because she said it on air, so I'm not bigging myself up or something. She said it herself. That's the most downloaded and watched episode. The one I was on before. The Leo Major story is really good.
Let's check it out.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, I'm on episode 2 of that. But other people you know as well, Pete D. Gaskell's been on it, and Chris Haig's been on a few of them. Addy and Hangs, who you will have heard with me on Smorgasbord, has been on a few of them. So yeah, she just reads like people a funny, not a funny story, a weird story every week about somebody from history. And you just react. Well, you just do what I do: react flippantly with silly jokes and interruptions. So yeah, it's cool.
That's fair enough.
But anyway, I cannot imagine what would follow on from The Godfather.
Godfather. What could be the next film? I don't know.
We've got the
Grandmaster?
the God Grandfather.
Well, it's obviously got to be the next masterpiece of
The Godfather.
of Coppola. Jack, obviously.
Peggy Sue got married
Yeah.
to Nicolas Cage. I think I see
Bram
the flaw in
Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, that film! I don't like that film. I know a lot of people like that film, but yeah, I don't.
Or as my cousin once said, where's Caravan's Dracula?
Just one.
She got drunk.
Just one point on that. He said on the commentary, because it comes up, Mario Puzo's The Godfather, and he said that he always, where he adapted anything, he would always make sure the author's name was in the title. So he did John Grisham's The Rainmaker and so on.
Of course.
Funny thing is, Bram Stoker's Dracula has always been known as Bram Stoker's Dracula. That film, not just Dracula.
No,
Yeah,
it's Bram
this
Stoker's,
film has
yeah.
never been known as Mario Puzo's The Godfather.
No, it's a bit strange, isn't it?
But let's leave that on a cliffhanger. We can come back and discuss that more next week, which means Becca.
Do you expect to talk will return with Godfather Part 2?
You fucking see that coming.
Now, is that Mario Puzo's The Godfather Part 2? Or,
Mario Puzo's
or was that
Godfather
just
Part 2.
Or was that just
Or
Godfather?
perhaps he's a sequel. Perhaps it's Mario Puzo 2, Operation Miami Beach. Good night, folks.
Good night.
Bye.